on this computer. Hope that doesn't crash everything. Thank you, Album. I'm sure everyone that couldn't be would be very grateful for you doing that. So before we get started, obviously you guys, I'm sure by now are aware that I got 91 on my GAMSAT, but I wanted to just let you know a bit more about me and what qualifies me to be able to, I don't know, take all your time on this lovely Wednesday night. Firstly, just to, I guess, dispel any discussion out there about my result. I'm sharing screen. I hope you can see it. This is my GAMSAT portal. And this was my results. So I hope we can...
Looks Photoshopped to me. I'm not convinced.
I hope that dispels any rumors about that. Since finishing my GAMSAT, I have started tutoring other students. It kind of just, I fell into it. I got a bunch of requests for tutoring, ended up writing a book, and Vice obviously did an article about me. They turned it into me being sober for 7 years, but that's the press for you. And here's our group. We've got 1,100 members now. That's kind of exploding. It's getting out of control, but I work for free in there. So it's a good opportunity for me to practice sharpening the sword of how to get people to where I am. And I'm really, really pleased lately to start to see some of the students like Anna, particularly Zoe, Kira and Lara, who started out in the group with pretty average results, and in some cases I'm starting to see what are, in my estimation, high 80s, pushing on my level of writing. And with 6 weeks to go, there's 1 or 2 students that I hope will do better than me. So that's really productive resource. You guys are all welcome to join if you're not in there already. And I want to show you one other thing as well. So that student, I think I did see she's here. Sorry, Zoe, if this embarrasses you, but this is the lovely student that I have an infatuation with her writing, talking about the essays that she got of mine and the resources she purchased. Oh, wait, I've got to share screen in a different way to you guys, don't I? Give me a tick. Share screen. There we go.
When I first read Michael's essay, I was scared. Not going to lie, I was really intimidated because there was so much information coming at me, and I thought his ideas were so sophisticated and his language was so complex. His writing is so eloquent, and at the same time, it was very reassuring because I thought, this guy knows what he's doing. This guy knows what he's talking about. And if I take on his advice, I will definitely be heading the right direction.
I was convinced that this person knew what he was doing when it came to essay writing. And later along the line, when I saw his essays, I was wondering, wait, so that's the end product I'm building up towards. How is that possible? That thing looks like something I would write in 3 days. But eventually I grew comfortable with it because what Michael has shown people is that this is an engineered process, that it is replicable.
I think Michael's materials and resources.
All right, cool. I hope that in some way qualifies me to have a chat to you and provide some measure of instruction. Before we go on, I guess I wanted to have a chat and see who we're actually talking to. So I've created a poll. I hope it works, but Zoe. Launch poll. If you guys want to take a quick sec to jot those questions down, this will allow us to tailor what we discuss, me and Arshad, to where you guys are at and what you're hoping to see from the session today. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. Zoe's dying. I'm sorry, darling. Also, if you guys want to jot any questions down in the chat, do so. I will try and answer them all for you. Or if not, we'll have a Q&A. I'm happy to stay back as long as it takes. So after the webinar, if you guys just want to pick my brain, I'm working for free tonight. So I'll set it up to you guys quick. All right, so we've got some results coming in. Interesting, okay. Right. So most people here so far have sat the GAMI before. Cool. Main difficulties are coming up with ideas and structuring them in a way that they flow. Okay. Cool.
I would have loved it if one of the options was not just coming up with ideas, but being able to connect ideas together. I guess that kind of connects with structuring your ideas in a way that flows. But I feel like that's a big thing that people struggle with.
Can you repeat that for me, Arshad? So
like just the ability to kind of like connect the information, to the themes, the quotes you come across, being able to kind of like mind map and draw connections between things. I feel like if I were to just say to a student, tell me something interesting or come up with an interesting essay contention, provided no context, I feel like a lot of students would be able to do that. But then when they kind of put in this box, that ability to kind of draw connections between things, I think that's something that a lot of students struggle with.
Yeah, okay. I might get you to talk about that, mate, because to be honest, I know how to interact with sources such that you build a bank of ideas, and I know how to approach methodologically, is that even a word, the task, in the sense of, all right, here's a quote that I'm given, here's how to structure it or structure an essay from it. But there is an element of it that is a spontaneous kind of process. And I think that's a perfect example of where you might be better at some of those earlier things than I would. There are some questions I might just, while I'll give this poll a little bit longer and answer these questions. Chi wants to know, do we respond to the theme or the quote? ACE's indication is to respond to one or more of the prompts. I have tried both. I found out in the end that I've got a whole blog on it, but essentially most people think that the theme is the one word that crops up in all of the quotes. And inevitably it's not, because that's a very reductive way to approach 5 incredibly complex and nuanced ideas. And once you make that initial reduction of those ideas to that one word, you conflate these distinct ideas and don't appreciate them in their complexity and fullness. And I think the essential thing being tested in section 2 is what you make from the task. And what you make from the task is essentially how you appreciate those quotes and situate them in their broader political or social or historical context, and then situate your ideas in response to them in those contexts. So I think that being reductive in thinking the theme is this one word is an initial challenge or problem that most people have. Once you do that, even if you do completely appreciate these different ideas in their complexity, you're going to filter everything you read through the lens of your own experiences, worldviews, gender, socioeconomics, beliefs, biases, and it kind of disfigures it. So if you then do these two processes, first the reduction to one word, and then the extrapolation of a theme based on your own particular view of the world and ideas, you're responding to something or an idea of what the theme is that won't necessarily be shared by the marker. So it can flow on to, or it can present itself as a lack of clarity. I had an issue early in my prep where tutors would ask me, which prompt are you referring to? Is this on theme? And then I could explain the fullness that perhaps they hadn't gone to the effort to of how this is in direct response to the theme. But ultimately I just decided to take the pragmatic approach and just pick a prompt and be super specific with it. So one of the key things that I think helps in GAMSAT, or 3 C's, concision, clarity, and cohesion. So clarity is greatly aided by just responding to one prompt. You don't have to, there's no rules, but I just found it led to better essays. So I hope that answers Gigi. Sarah, how can you estimate where you are? Yeah, that's a hard one. I don't know, get some tutors and ask them. You can, if you don't know, do the ACER online tests. Some people have said that they're not accurate. Some people have said they are accurate. They did put me in the top 1% both times I did it. So it worked for me.
I actually think they're quite good. Every now and then there's somebody would write an essay that kind of breaks their algorithm that would get a good mark, but it doesn't really fit in with the algorithm, and then they kind of just it throws out a completely wrong mark. But for those of you who don't know, for most of, it's not confirmed for the GAMSAT, but for most of ACE's other exams that they do, the way that they mark their essays is that it initially gets marked by a bot, and then it gets secondary marked by a person and then maybe a tertiary mark by another person. So there's a good chance that ASA might be doing that for the GAMSAT as well. I can't say that 100%, but for some of their other like non-medical exams, for their essays, they have a bot initially mark it, and then it kind of categorizes all of the different papers, and then they have people mark it, right? So I'd say it's a pretty useful tool, and it's what is it? It's like $20, right?
No idea, mate.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cheap.
For it, to be honest. So
yeah, I'd say everyone should at least give it one go at some point just to kind of see where they're landing. Don't do it too close to the GAMSAT because it might throw you off completely in terms of where you think you are. Probably now would actually be a good time to try it out with a month or so left. I wouldn't try it out any later, but I actually think it's a pretty useful resource, even though it gets quite a lot of shtick.
Yeah, cool. I might pick a couple of other questions, but we'll just go through these poll results. So we've got, 35% of the people below 60, the majority of the people here between 60 and 70, and then 17% of the high markers. So just so you know, for those people that are flirting with 70 or above in your own perception, like my personal opinion or my experience of it is that if you can write to a 70, you can write to an 85 very easily. Like it's just a mindset shift. Like I could point out a couple of things literally that will just like absolutely destroy the results. A lot of the difficulty I think is learning how to articulate yourself, have a grip or a mastery of the language, or to establish a baseline of depth with which to confront the quotes or understand the world around you, which are some of the harder things to do. That doesn't mean that you can't use what we're about to say today to get much better results. You absolutely can. But even the 60 to 70, like that's 65 and above, I think it becomes a lot easier. But for those that are below 65, actually, Arshad, you might have something to say on that. To be honest, in truth, I wouldn't know a lot about teaching them. What would you say that the biggest thing or most important thing to know for those that are currently at the lower end of section 2 is to?
Yeah, it really depends on what the nature of the gap that they have is, right? Like I was telling that story of a student that on his first sit, he got like a mid 40 and then he went all the way up to a high 70 on his second sit. It's the reason he was able to jump so much is that the gaps that he had were gaps that you could fix within 2-3 months. Whereas sometimes there's gaps that need more longer term fixes. Like if you have like really weak English and you need to build that up to a certain level, or if your ability to connect concepts is like, the ability to connect concepts is something that you can build really, not really easily, but kind of easily, right? The ability to just build structure to your essay, that's something that's not too difficult. I'd say that's probably like the easiest thing, right? So it all depends on the nature of what exactly it is you're missing. And that'll kind of define what your timeline is and how you want to go about improving.
Cool. Thanks, Arshad. So most of us have sat the GAMSAT before. So I imagine there's some desire to finally get it behind you. I don't know how you do it, to be honest. I respect that. I would have cried if I had to do it again. Actually, when I got my result, I actually didn't realize that I'd done well for a while because it was just relief that I realized I'd done well enough that I didn't have to sit it again. And it was just that relief for about a day. And I looked back and I was like, wait, that was actually really good. So hopefully this can be a last sitting and we can help you guys get some strategies today that'll mean that you don't have to go through that again. 3% have no idea who I am. Cool. Most of you guys are very familiar. Sweet. Biggest thing that would make a difference. So ideas took the 73%. Come on, what that is. Cool. Understanding what the task requires. You will get a very explicit explanation of that. So for the 42% that have that as a concern right now, that shouldn't be after tonight. If it is after the webinar, ask me a question and I will clarify for you. And structuring ideas. Okay. I might get you guys later to do like a emoji react or something, because me and Arshad were kind of wondering about whether you guys would prefer to go through one of my essays or maybe just to do an essay live. In fact, we might as well just do it now. I don't know if you guys can use that reaction thing, but maybe do a love heart if you want to see one of mine, or a wow face if you want to me and Arshad to go through and write an essay live. Is that going to work if you guys do that? You're allowed to do that? No, not coming through. Oh, well, we'll just flip a coin. And then lastly, what section are we most confident with? Most people in 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right, even split. Sweet. And then before we move on, the link will be sent via email. Task A is it best to present both sides. Melissa, I think that hopefully what will become clear, at least partially after today or tonight, is that the essential thing that is provoked in section 2 is your comprehension of the world around you, or the way that you think. When you take everything to be a for and against, this binary investigation or approach to prompts is somewhat simplistic. Everything has shades of grey and nuance. To just basically think that everything is either for or against is, to be honest, in a way, to have shot yourself in the foot before you began the task. So I would encourage you probably not to do that. Most of my essays, I mean, I wouldn't lie, but most of my essays, I found that I agreed more or less with one of the prompts, but there was kind of a partial agreement. There was something that I felt that they hadn't considered, or that I think was important to consider. So I use that as an opportunity to go, well, yes, this, but no, that, and also you should consider X, Y, Z. So it was kind of an opportunity to show what it is that I know, and similarly for you, an opportunity to show what you know. Zoe wants me to do the wow. Can't remember what that was. Live plan, right? Where can I read some of your writing, Minhal? I have blogs, 90plusgamsat.com. There's a blog there. I have free chapters from my books. I put one up last night. I wrote it at 3 a.m, so I haven't read it back yet, so I don't know how good it is, but people seem to be happy with it in the group. All right, we might move on and come back to questions later. What did I want to do? Yeah, cool. So I want to focus on one thing today that we would get or approach or try and clarify for each other. Oh, people are waiting in the room. Sorry. Hello, new people. Sorry for keeping you waiting. Cool. So the one thing is how you can perform well in the GAMSAT without being amazing at everything through overperforming in section 2, even if you're not already a great writer. That might seem like I've bitten off a lot. I'll repeat it. How to perform well in the GAMSAT without being amazing at everything by overperforming in section 2, even if you're not a great writer. There are a couple of beliefs that I think, or 3 in particular beliefs that people have that may make this at the outset seem like a big ask or a bit overdramatic or flamboyant. So the first is that there seems to be a meme or an idea in GAMSAT that you just have to be really good already. You have to be really smart at science. You have to be a really good reasoner. You have to be a really good writer. And I think that's bullshit, to be honest. I didn't do chemistry in even high school, like none. And I hate chemistry. And I got 84 in section 3. I'm not like a super genius, genuinely. It's just consistent hard work, finding out the people who were doing what I wanted to do well and asking them how they did it and ripping it off, which is exactly what I'm doing here for you guys today. I hope that you rip me off because, well, if it means that you get a good mark, then that's specifically what I'm trying to do. Also, something I want to clarify, which is the heart of what I learned about section 2 that will help people, if not score well, then feel somewhat at ease or empowered about their ability to score well if they're not currently a good writer or don't think that they're a good writer, which is that GAMSAT section 2 is not a test of your writing. I realized that when I started writing essays at the beginning of my prep, and I've always been a good writer. In year 12, I mean, I'd finished year 12 like 10 years ago or something, and they're still using my essays, I hear. But I was starting to write at a 60, I was told, by multiple tutors. And so this showed me, there's something going on here. I know I'm doing all the right things. These are great essays. Now I see, looking back, that you could be a journalist and that means nothing for GAMSAT. Because GAMSAT is not a test of your writing, it's a test of your thinking. It's a test of you, it's a test of where your writing is coming from. I did a tut for Zoe, the person who seems to be coming up a million times, where I came up with an example that in retrospect is probably a pretty good way of depicting my understanding of what a good way to do very well in section 2 is, which is, I said to her that imagine that you're in an orchard with a bunch of apple trees and each tree contains a faculty of your intelligence, whether it's creative, your emotional intelligence, critical reasoning, and there are multiple kinds of intelligences. I think, is it Howard Gardner his theory of multiple intelligences. There's like kinesthetic for sports people, or musical, or linguistic, whatever it is, right? And if each tree is one of those faculties, you can just reach for the lowest hanging apples. So you might, for example, at the start of a task be like to narrate about a time in your life that shows insight into the theme. And through this narration, you have an opportunity for figurative expression, to convey emotional intelligence, sensitivity to others, to personify the world around you, or to show your appreciation of its nuances. And so you can collect kind of those easy apples from the bottom of the tree. But if you're someone that relies too heavily on one of your faculties of intelligence, such as those who might like to narrate for the whole essay, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. There's no like rule of how you have to write. People also have this idea that, I'm still admitting people, pardon me, playing with my laptop. There's this idea that you have to write task A in argumentative and task B in discursive, and that came from the old Des O'Neill guides, because back then that was how it had to be. It's not anymore. So you don't need to do creative writing or argumentative writing. But the issue is that if you do, for example, only do argumentative and display that critical reasoning type intelligence, or if you narrate, you do get those lower apples that you start having to climb further and further up the tree to grab the apples from higher in the tree. And there's kind of that thing of diminishing returns. Whereas if you, for example, start to narrate at the start of a task B, and you show an ability to talk figuratively, or to relate to that time where maybe your mum yelled at you, but you realise that perhaps then you took it as anger, or felt aggressed, but in retrospect perhaps it came from fear and that she loves you. You've shown that kind of emotive faculty, and then if you reflect on that narrative and distill from it an idea about the world around you, and perhaps link it then to contemporary society and develop a point, and you extrapolate perhaps from that I don't know, perhaps human beings are intrinsically limited by their life experiences, and as a function of this, we all have a unique perception of the world. If that's this thing that you've distilled from that example about your mum, and then you go, oh, okay, this could be seen, for example, in the divergence of worldviews between perhaps Donald Trump and whatever his name is, Kim Jong-il, Rocket Man, whatever he called him. And perhaps going to that, you begin to show a different faculty. So you've gone to a different tree, starting to collect lower hanging fruit. And if you keep switching and showing these different intelligences, it's a very high yield way, if you do have these intelligences, to collect all the easy apples rather than climbing farther up one tree. So essentially, section 2, or doing very well in section 2, is proportional to your ability to show the marker not what you know, not what you see, but how you are and how you think. And this is why when I see essays, or I get students send me essays, and they start with something like, technology is ubiquitous in modern day society. I don't know, a product that you want is only a click away. Observing these things about the world around you doesn't really tell me anything about you as a thinker. All I know is that you've witnessed something. And that doesn't really give me, if I'm the marker, an ability to assess who you are, how you think. And it becomes a collection of statements of the obvious. So you want to have your voice in it, and you want to try and convey how you have interacted with the prompt in such a way that you're not just observing things that are extant already. Arshad, I might get you to simplify that or distill that into something that was less verbose for those.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point, right? So, and I definitely agree. I think in terms of the way you as a student should go about executing that, you want to be realistic with where you are at as well, in terms of your ability to do certain things and execute on certain things, right? But the point that Michael is trying to make, which I think is a really good point as well, is when you're like kind of writing you have a really strong argumentative style, right? There's a point of diminishing returns, right? Like the essay marker reads your argumentative writings like, wow, this person's so analytical, this person's so critical, his logic, his flow is, everything is awesome. But then he carries on reading and he's like, okay, you know, where is this going? It's not really telling me anything more about this person, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can still get a really good mark by doing that. But like, again, you're kind of like, there's that diminishing returns. If you as an individual know that you have the skills to maybe then pivot and start to make it a bit more personal, maybe by having a personal example, or maybe by starting off the essay with like, you know, a personal anecdote, or maybe adding something in a little bit more creative to kind of temper your point, then you're showing the essay marker another side of yourself. But again, only if you have the ability to do that, right? Don't write this great argumentative and then come in with this really shitty personal anecdote that just throws your essay off, right? But if you know you have the ability to do both, or show multiple skills, then you're kind of showing the reader that you have multiple skills, right? And then he's not looking at that one skill and getting bored of it. He's seeing your next skill and he's seeing that constantly coming up, right? But again, this is something that you need to be realistic with yourself. Do you have the ability to do that, right? Because maybe you're the type of student that would write an argumentative essay purely by itself and get a high 70. And then you try to add a personal element to it, and it actually throws it off, and it takes, instead of making it better, it makes it worse because you don't really have that skill, right? So I think the main point is show all of your skills, provided you actually have them. Don't try to show skills you don't have, but if you have all the skills, you know, flex it, right? I remember my second highest scoring student, he got like an 89. This dude was like, he lived in Fitzroy, ultimate hipster. He was already a dentist. He was like in his early 30s. He was just a legend. And he used to write like these full-blown essays, and he used to end his essays off with like a short poem. And in all honesty, the poems themselves, I'd be like, these poems could get like a 75, 80 in the GAMSAT by themselves. That's how good they were, right? Like, I didn't even know what this dude was trying to get into med, but he was like gifted in a different way, right? But what did he do over there? He was showing the reader his analytical skills, and then at the same time showing the reader his creative personal skills, so on and so forth, right? And that's the reason he was able to do that is because he actually had both of those skills, right? So now you don't be the person that writes a great analytical essay and then just chucks on a shitty poem at the end to ruin your essay. But if you have that skill, find a way of incorporating it in the logic of the essay as a whole. Is it okay to do this technique in a task A by being reflective? Yes, I'd recommend you have a look at the second podcast that Michael and I did, or maybe the first one. We talked about the tone of essays. So there's no prescriptiveness in task A or task B. You have to be argumentative in task A. You have to be reflective in task B. Task A lends itself better to argumentative essays, the quotes and the themes that come up, but you can bring in a reflective element to it in any way that you want, as long as it's getting to the point and relating to the quotes, the themes overall. But yeah, Michael, I'll let you jump in. You look like you're poised.
I don't want to encourage people just to chop and change and write these kind of really random bits of writing. I'll show you later, if you like, exactly what I do. I don't narrate in a task A. My task A's are surgical. They are precise, clinical, logical, analytical. However, equally, I take care in the hook at the start and the end, particularly, to use not narration, but perhaps a figurative or poetic device to grab attention quickly. And I do take care, but it's more and this is, I'm not sure that this is something that can be taught. I think that this is something that perhaps you've either cultivated this particular ability or not. That's fine if you haven't, but if you have got the ability to write or embellish in poetic ways, or use cadence, which is kind of the rhythm, the beat of I write with a particular cadence, so it flows, and it's kind of like, if you look behind it, it's like or whatever it might be, but it's always quite rhythmic, and or to contrast certain ideas. I can't remember who it was. I can't remember even the exact sentence, but there was an essay I was marking yesterday, and there were two words. It was one started with a P and an S, and then there was a semicolon, and the next word was a P and an S. I can't remember exactly what the words were, but the point is that there was that kind of stylistic device or contrasting these two things. So if you have the ability that this comes up intuitively, I think it is in a task A useful to lean on that. But I'm not prescribing everyone to narrate or reflect in a task A. But I'll just show you guys later if you like what my essays look like. So you can say. Should we do a couple of, how do you plan for a good essay? That's probably a bit broad for now, NP. I'll come back to that. Daniela, should. As far as word limits, look, I don't think you should aim for them like in and of itself. Like there are certainly other things that you should be paying attention to first, like how do I, make something significant or insightful or in depth of the theme? How do I communicate myself clearly, succinctly? How can I write beautifully or in a way that's aesthetically pleasing? These are probably principal concerns. Am I using examples from existing motifs and ideas in behavioral economics or psychology or philosophy? But if you are doing all that and you want to know how many words, I usually kind of went for 800-ish. My longest was 1200. That was a beast. I probably wouldn't go less than 600, but again, I think that you've got so much to be focusing on. There's probably not a great deal of benefit in focusing too much on words. Arshad, oh, you're answering, cool, sweet. All right, we might, actually, I'll just quickly read out. Someone asked me, who was it? Oh, that's right, Zoe. She wanted to know what the branches were. So what they're trees, Zoe, not branches, but that's okay. They can be branches if you like. The different faculties that I'm referring to, I just brainstormed a list. Creative writing, for example, figurative narration, analytical writing, critical reasoning, logic, poetry, stylistic devices, emotional intelligence, social intelligences, awareness of contemporary issues and motives in philosophy, psychology, behavioral economics, or other accepted ideas. They're just some of the various things that you might like to consider incorporating into your essays if you wish to increase the mark. Okay, so just to cap off that last bit, why we were talking about that was because we were smashing the belief that you already have to be good at something to do well. And the reason I was going into all that was to say that if you're not a good writer, that's okay, but you are good at something. Everyone has their own different intelligences. And because this is not a test of writing, it's a test of your intelligences, knowing that, playing to that, and showcasing them the best you can will get you a good mark, even if you're not a good writer, okay? Obviously, everything has to happen in balance. You can't just only do one thing. But the words from the ACER booklet are that what is being tested is the quality of thoughts and ideas developed in response to the task. And, this is a direct quote, by the way, and language and structure, but only insofar as it contributes to thoughts and ideas, not in isolation. What that means is that language and structure is not being assessed by itself. If it's an impediment to your thoughts and ideas, for example, if you're not writing clearly, they don't care that much about spelling because they know you're rushed. But like if you're like blatantly misspelling your and Y-O-U''re, things like that. If that's an impediment to the development of thoughts and ideas, then yeah, it's not going to mark well. But that's not essentially what's being tested.
Yeah, it's basically like they can't give you a good mark for your idea if they don't understand what your idea is, right? Like the analogy that I like to use is, you can't drink the juice without the glass. I mean, technically you can go on the floor and like lick it off the floor, but like don't do that, right? Don't lick juice off the floor, right?
They do have their phrases now.
Yeah, but I think the main thing is like Michael mentioned, you want to think about, you have to make it accessible for the reader, right? That's the main thing, right? If the reader can't understand your idea, it's just random crap in you. It's only a good idea in your head. It doesn't actually make it a good idea for them.
I'm just, by the way, copy pasting. Paul wanted to know about that list that I just read out. I did write it further up in the chat, but I've copy pasted it back in that chat. If you guys want to copy, grab that. Gabriella, hello, admit. So we're basically saying that you've got these intelligences, you can display these faculties, even if you're not a fantastic writer, so long as it's not an impediment to your writing or to the ideas being conveyed, then you can score well without being a good writer. And the same thing, this isn't a section 3 webinar, but there's just a task and there's the amount of effort and consistent attention and the quality of attention that you give that task. And when the exam comes, the result is just a reflection of all of those different moments. And if for all of those moments for the 6 months or however many months it is before, you've put in quality attention, guess what the mark's going to be? Quality. You don't just, doesn't just appear. There's nothing whatsoever saying that you can't be good at anything you want to be good at. Google it. Find someone that's good and ask them. That's what I did. I trawled Paging Doctor, the forums, literally. I don't know if Jamie's here. Anyway, she knew me from when I was preparing, and she mentioned to me that there were these, she had a list of names that had got above 80, and I searched for them everywhere. I sent them all DMs, no one replied to me. I went on the hunt for anyone who knew anything. And then I copied them. And then I learned, so I integrated it into what I'll show you later after the end of the webinar, show the notes that I'd made as I started to develop this structure. You guys have got it kind of easy in that I'm just kind of like saying, here it is. But I had to figure it out myself. Anyway, so that's belief 1. And for those that have joined, I've noticed people are kind of being a bit late, but we're talking about shattering beliefs that are going to feed into this one idea, which is that you are able to perform well on the GAMSAT without being amazing at everything by overperforming in section 2, even if you're not a great writer. But we'll move on to the second belief that I hear, which is that you need to be good at all things. So for GAMSAT, you need to have these, you need to be able to do section 1 really well, section 2 really well, section 3 really well. I think everyone here is broadly aware of the fact that we're not going to get the exact same mark in every section, and that everyone's kind of got a different profile as far as those intelligences. I touched on this at the start of the webinar, but I think a couple of people have joined since then. When my friend Dan, who did the May GAMSAT, I was preparing for the September one at the time, got his mark back and he got 75 overall. I was like, whoa, because I thought like I could never get, I was trying to get 72. That was like, I was so like dedicated. I was like, I've got to get 72. And I realized, because he's a smart dude, he's not a super nerd though. And I realized, oh, hey, this is possible. And because he'd obliterated section 3, but did pretty poorly in section 1 and 2. And I was like, oh, hey, you just need to smash one section. And then I got fixated on this idea. I'm going to do really well in section 3. One of the people that are now one of my students, had seen me in a Facebook group, and I posted an essay for marking. I said, oh guys, I'm really trying to get above 90. And that person said, no, I don't think people can. And I was like, my personality is really like, no, watch me now. And I got fixated on it. Anyway, the reason I'm saying this is because not the heart of my strategy, but my approach was definitely very centered around this idea or this realization that I had that you only need to smash one section. And I chose section 2 because section 1 really, in my experience, is very hard to uplift. I think of the 3, it's the most direct kind of reflection of those intelligences. Like what it's testing, I don't think is the most of the 3 sections, an accumulation of what you have learned, understood, thought for your whole life up to that point. So I think it's pretty low return on investment to be doing a lot of section 1. Section 3, it depends on whether your uni is going to double weight section 3 or not. If so, obviously it would be very unwise to not do a lot of work for it. I did probably more work for section 3 than 2 actually, if I'm going to be truthful. But that was because I didn't really know section 3 very well, because I didn't have really the background except for maths. So my strategy was basically do nothing for section 1, and I did quite a lot for section 3, as I said, but I always knew that section 2 was, I kept reading about these people online that had like lifted 20 points, and like I never heard that for section 3. I'm sure Arshad would know someone, but I think that section 2 is the easiest section to lift. I have seen multiple people in my group lift. The most excessive example is like 25 plus points, but maybe not 20 points, but multiple people, 10, 15, and for a couple of months effort, and what if they posted 8 essays or something? Like it's a pretty good return on investment. You got 6 weeks to go until the sitting. So I don't know what you guys have done as far as studies so far, but you've only got a certain amount of time. And obviously take this into consideration with your individual marks. And if you're flirting with 50 on any of them, obviously that needs to be worked on because your whole sitting's gone if you get below 50. But yeah, I'd say that investing heavily in section 2 is a very high yield strategy. All right, so far we've got that you don't need to be already good at a section in order to do well in that section. You can either find someone who's already good, copy what they did and learn and continue to practice. Or if it's with relevance to section 2, you can focus or rather let go of the belief that you need to be a really good writer and focus more on conveying what kind of intelligences that you have. And then belief 2, you don't need to be good at all things. You can just unevenly weight your sections. And the last thing I hear, I might be being a bit facetious here, you don't need any help or prep materials or courses to do well. Well, that's not a bullshit belief like the other two. That's actually true. You don't need to give Arshad or me money in order to do well in your GAMSAT. You don't need to have a prep company. Yeah, you can absolutely do really, really well without any help at all. However, it would save you a lot of time, I think is the key thing. I don't want anyone to get the impression, and I'm always making a point to say in books or in the group, there's no like one way. I'm not like the dude with you just have to do it my way. That's absolutely not true. People, I had 7 tutors, yeah, and I had one of them tell me that I wouldn't get into med school if I didn't do what they said. And I kind of, at the time, obviously now it's easy with retrospect to be like, yeah, you know what you're talking about. But at the time, I kind of had to, it felt like taking a risk because like, I've got to back myself here and kind of go against someone that, you know, he's a tutor. You should know more than me. And I kind of had to follow my gut. And that made me really conscious of highlighting that this isn't like the one way to do it. Like, there are things you can distill from what I say and apply it to a completely different style. But yeah, there's like 6, 7, maybe 8, I think it's 8 weeks to go, just under 8 weeks to go. So as far as time saving, I mean, it took me 6 months to figure out what I now know about section 2. And I can just retrospectively go, hey guys, that's the path, just do that. And that will save you a lot of time. And that time that you free up will allow you to then study more for section 1 and 3, or take a week at the back end to relax before the exam. So no, you don't need to, but it would be quicker than figuring it out yourself. Certainly if I had all this stuff at the start of my preparation, I would have done much better. Yes, I mean, given all those things being true, it follows on then that if you know what the task requires, so for example, we're talking about the psychometric things and the displaying of different faculties. We actually didn't go into the psychometrics. We probably should. I'll come back to it later. And investing where you get the highest return and using the time you have effectively, that's all essentially what needs to be done in order for you to perform well. You've got a certain amount of time, invest it wisely, do what you know works. Now that's a bit abstract, I promise you. I mean, we've got more to say than that, or something more specific or concrete. But if you come away with nothing else today than having or letting go of those limiting beliefs that you have about yourself and realizing that actually, no, you can do well. And I would suggest that the approach would be through section 2 if you have limited time. And I would also suggest if you have the resources or the means, that asking me how I did it would be a good strategy. But I'm just going to quickly go through. There are like heaps of questions coming through. Oh, Arshad's taking care of them. And Kit, I know practically it's not possible while sitting the exam. It would be different. I tend to search quotes which I can't interpret and then try and investigate further through Google. Do you think it's a good practice? And Kit, so the question was, I tend to search quotes which I can't interpret well and then investigate them further based on knowledge I gain through Google. Do you think it's a good practice in terms of filling in gaps of knowledge? I would certainly encourage you to research. I think that, again, we go back to the amount of time you've got, and there are certain locuses of information which are going to be higher yield. We talked about this, Arshad and I, in the last podcast, but I've said it a million times, I'll say it again. The Minefield podcast on the ABC Listen app, literally, it is just listen to them, write it down, and then put it in your next essay. And then do that enough times that it's practice and it spontaneously comes up. And if you can put what they say in your section 2 essay, you do really well. But on top of that, go on.
I think like the main thing we talked about in the podcast, which I thought was a really, really useful point, is don't memorize facts. If all you're going to do is memorize facts from random resources, you're not going to score a crazy good mark. You could still get a good mark, but you're never going to break into the high 70s, low 80s, 90s, wherever you want to go, right? Maybe max you'll get is a low 70, high 60, stuff like that, if all you're doing is memorizing facts. Whenever you come across a resource, honestly, whatever resource it is, right? A good thinker can watch, I don't know, friggin' Teletubbies and come up with ideas, synthesize and understand information, right? The resource is important. Obviously, there's certain resources that are better than others, but the more important thing than the resource is taking the information from the resource and having a process of questioning it, understanding it, comparing it to the information that you already have in your own mind, and then coming to a synthesis conclusion, whatever you want to call it, about what you think, right? Because then when you do that, you actually have your own idea. You haven't just memorized the fact, right? And when you have your own idea, those are really easy to manipulate and control within essays, right? So tomorrow, if you watch, I don't know, or if you listen to a podcast on the minefield and it's talking about, I don't know, sexism in Australia or something like that, right? And it's completely opposite to the ideas that you already had about sexism in Australia, right? What you should be doing is not just memorizing the facts from that podcast. What you should be doing is you should be questioning that podcast. Why did I have separate ideas to that? Why is this person saying something else? You question it, you compare, you contrast the information, you break down the logic, and then you come to your own opinion. Your own opinion might be something in the middle. It might be what the person in the podcast said. It might be the original opinion that you already had, or anything in between. But by going through that process, you make the opinion your own. And when you do that, you have a lot more control of it, a much better understanding of it as well, right? So again, memorizing facts is okay. It's not bad, but it's not going to take you anywhere crazy, if that makes sense, right?
Arshad, certainly don't memorize facts. And as discussed earlier in the webinar, the repetition of facts or statements of the obvious aren't going to score well because they're testing your intelligence, not what you see. When you say something obvious, it's kind of like going up to the Mona Lisa and being like, there's green paint, there's red paint, the frame is rectangle. It's like, okay, yeah, cool. But, even if you were to say, she seems lonely, at least I get something. Like I can see, there's an element of emotional intelligence that this person has, So certainly don't just repeat facts about the world. Definitely not what I meant. And if it came across like that, good clarification, Arshad. I think I might take it for granted that when I interact with materials that it automatically triggers me to consider what I already understand or think about in a different way. But I do think as well that things like that and I read a lot of opinion pieces from The Guardian and the New York Times and The Quadrant. I have a blog called How to Use Evidence in Task A, something like that. I've listed a bunch of articles that you should all read. And also too, opinion pieces in these, they read quite like GAMSAT style, so it's good to interact with. But certainly don't memorize, but they can be an impetus for or an opportunity for you to expose yourself to ideas that perhaps you wouldn't before. So for example, off the top of my head, I listened to a Mindful podcast around the Black Lives Matter riots. And it was about the abolition of the police. And they had I think it was the head of law at Harvard Uni or Yale, or wherever it was, come on and discuss the legal things behind it. And what they discussed was that, that the power or credibility of the police is contingent on or undergirded by the esteem with which the community holds the police, by the perceptions of procedural fairness by the public of the police, and by the feelings of safety that the police elicit in a community. And in the Black Lives Matter protests, when you had for the first time white communities feeling unsafe as a result of the police coming down the street in riot gear, when you had these images of the police who are outfitted in military surplus kind of shake or rattle this idea that they are there for your safety. When you had the video circulate of the policeman's knee on, it was George Floyd is his name, his neck, that interrupts ideas about procedural fairness. And so the foundations on which the credibility of the police exist on were shaken and crumbled. And that led to calls for the abolition of the police and indeed the Minnesota Police Department disbanding. So I'm not suggesting read it and write it down and copy it, but I am suggesting that I wouldn't have had that idea. I wouldn't have seen that the credibility of the police was contingent on these three things. I wouldn't have seen in another episode, for example, that that globalization is undergirded or underpinned by communicative flows and by interdependence and intercommunication. Once it's drawn to my attention and I see it, I can't unsee it so long as I've properly interacted with the material. And through exposing yourself to people who are giving you these ideas, when you then get the quotes, you have a better insight into the world around you. And that allows, and the conveying of that is essentially what's being tested. So that's why I suggested it can be quite a good thing to do. I don't know how we got on the topic of the minefield, but anyway, you should read that blog, the evidence blog. It's a good one.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah,
we're
mate.
getting quite a lot of questions on
all right, do you want
planning.
to, just so you all know, I will literally stay here to 1 or 3 in the morning. If you guys are up for it, I will answer every question you have. Do not fear. I am conscious though that there are a group of people that probably want to finish by 8:30, not 11. So
yeah,
maybe keep with what you can, but I will come back to the questions later because we have oh, actually, we'll do a few more now. That's all right.
Yeah.
Did you plan in the actual GAMSAT? Yes, I did. Yes. When I get a prompt, if you haven't, read the quote interpretation blog that I wrote. But I interpret the quotes in my own words. You know what we should probably do? I'm just going to live right now. We're going to pull up an ASA set. I don't know if I'm allowed to screen share this. Maybe that's copyright. I don't know. I don't really care. And I'm going to show you what I mean by interpreting the quotes and how I plan them, because this is essentially the origin of, what am I doing? GAMSAT, where are you? Desktop, University, GAMSAT, stay. Section, practice questions, full exam questions, ASA. Okay, I'm going to screen share. And here we are, I hope you can see me. The purple ones are nasty from memory. So are the reds. Let's just pick this. We'll see what's in good old green. Oh, I loved that question. Oh, this is like giving me nostalgia. Where are you, section 2? That would be a section 1. Here we are. Cool. Richards was in the group this week. I'm sick of looking at it. So was laughter. You insisted to actually laughter. We'll just go with these ones. So most people are going to look at these 5 quotes and they're going to say, all right, the theme is rich or money or wealth. And of course, they're going to reduce wealth to fiscal wealth or financial wealth and ignore that there are other forms of wealth, such as spiritual wealth or relationships. Your ability to smile, I think, makes you quite wealthy. But the first error they're going to have is they're going to go, okay, we're not going to define what wealth is. We're just going to call it fiscal wealth, and that's fine. You're probably not going to get massively marked down for that, but you have missed an opportunity. And then they're going to go, instead of reading the quotes, they're just going to go, okay, cool, the topic is wealth. And they're going to think, right, what have I got to say about wealth? And they're going to write something about money. And the issue is that you've reduced the theme and kind of got it off. Like, all right, so let me pick the third quote. Few rich men own their property owns them. That is not to do with wealth. That is to do with, so it's to do, when I read that, I see that the obsession with accumulation has a deadening effect on the human spirit. And your need or fear, which engenders an fanatical, sometimes, at least in my experience in contemporary Western life. Note how I just qualified that. I didn't say that it was absolute. That wealth leads to a fanatical obsession with fear leads to a fanatical obsession with security. And we perceive indeed that when we put our roots down, or that when we accumulate financial wealth, that we are secure. The problem is that we're seeking security outside ourselves. And for as long as we do that, we will be insecure. Security only comes when you find security from within. So to me, that's not about money at all. I could do this for every quote. My point is, though, that whoever R. Ingersoll is had more to say than just money. You know, so your first error is, and when I do that for each of them, there's going to be 5 completely nuanced different ideas that are being provoked or by ASA, by showing us that. And so your first error is calling them all wealth. And then your second error is you won't even necessarily respond, even if they were about wealth, to the part of the quote that is about wealth. You'll just kind of say what you think about wealth. And then, you know, you might try and use the quote or a couple of words in the quote and think you're being really smart, or think you're being really on prompt. So how did I get on that? Oh yeah, quotes. So I plan, but the first part of planning is looking at the quotes and thinking, what might I have to say from my life experiences, current understandings, by cross-referencing various things that I've exposed myself to, such as opinion pieces from these journalists or from the minefield. You know, I try and, I said earlier in the webinar that being good at something essentially boils down to finding whoever is the best at what you want to be good at and being in the seat next to them and copying. So I be in the seat next to people that are really bloody smart, really like philosophers, the best journalists. And I expose myself to these materials. And through doing that, I'm able to draw on them when I consider these prompts. So first I look for what I might have to say. As I answered earlier in the webinar, I found better success in not responding to them all and picking one particular quote. How I planned depended on task A and B. I do them differently. So in a task A, the backbone of my task A is logic. So I'll just go back to that example then. What was it? Few rich men own their property owns them. Is this a task A? Yes, it is. Okay, so my contention, let's just say I want to say that from what I said earlier, security is, or humans have a fanatical, or my experience in the contemporary West of humans is that there appears to be some kind of fanatical obsession with security that arises from fear, which is fundamentally limiting to the human condition, and misapprehension of the importance of cultivating security internally. That might be my contention. And I then, in order to prove that contention plausible, need to come up with 2 premises which, if I posit and prove correct and you believe, that necessarily imply the correctness of my contention. A famous example is, in order to prove that Socrates is mortal, the premises are that all philosophers are mortal, premise 1, and that Socrates is a philosopher, premise 2. And if you believe that all philosophers are mortal and that Socrates is a philosopher, it necessarily follows that Socrates is mortal. So applying that to what I just said, which in a nutshell was I have witnessed an obsession with fear, which feeds into or rather an overgrowth or an undercurrent, a subliminal undercurrent of fear, which leads to a fanatical obsession with security, and a misapprehension of the importance of cultivating internal security. How would I prove that? Okay, well, the first bit is I've witnessed, that needs no proof. The next bit is a fear. Okay, so there's fear, I need to prove there's fear, which has led to a fanatical obsession with security. So my topic sentence 1 is going to be something like, there is a, it's hard to do the top of my head without writing. Okay, the natural reaching for security is a byproduct of feelings of fear is going to be my topic sentence 1. And then the purpose of body paragraph 1 is to prove the validity of that topic sentence. So I now need to connect reasonably that a natural or common human response to fear is to reach for security. I might use motifs in philosophy to expound on my point, or psychology. I might, for example, use Freud and the unconscious, or Jung and the shadow. And off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what I'd write. Body paragraph. How would you prove security in fear? I think that you could use examples in COVID, for example. Toilet paper buying seems a particularly trivial example that comes to mind. But the interest and fanaticism about the material world imbuing upon us or lending us security, at least only in perception, is perfectly exemplified by the tribal behaviour of people during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, at least in Australia. Now, I've given a great example that is on point. I've got a topic sentence that feeds into the conclusion, but the job's not done. An example doesn't prove a point. It's an example of a point, but it doesn't mean that there aren't counter examples of that point, or indeed more counter examples than the example I gave. So I must evaluate the example in light of the point. I might not go through the rest of the essay because this could go on forever. But the point is, the majority of that body paragraph should be the evaluation of my point in light of the theme. So I've given you an example of the toilet paper buying. I'll now go, what was the theme? Their property owns them. Cool. So a departure from normal ways of interacting with our peers or members of society with decency, respect, and dignity, which was shown during this example, is indicative of deriving from or arising from fearful emotions, which may, I can't abjectly or definitively say that it was fear that was, or that led to a departure from normal modes of interaction with each other. But I think it's reasonable to say that there is fear during COVID and that that behaviour was fearful. So that's the evaluation. And then finally, there's the link. And this, by the way, is just high school stuff. PEEL, P-E-E-L. Point, example, evaluation, link. Most people will go, here's a point and here's an evaluation, or here's an example, and they think the job's done. Maybe if they're good, they'll go point, example, evaluation. But the thing is, the way I evaluate something is, again, through the prism of my kind of ideas about the world. It doesn't it's not necessarily clear to the marker how exactly your evaluation feeds into the contention. It might be clear that it feeds into the topic sentence, but not the contention. So you make a point to explicitly go, this shows how property, I might use the words property owns them, but yeah. So anyway, my first point is that fear leads to security. And what was my contention originally? There's a misapprehension of the importance of cultivating security internally. So the second premise would be, can't really prove that there's a misapprehension, but if I can prove that there is something to comprehend about the importance of internal security, and that, at least in my experience, that it's not commonplace in society that people would have that idea or comprehension of security, then I think I can reasonably conclude that there is a misapprehension broadly about the importance of cultivating security. And if I've done that in the format that I just described, and my two premises are plausible, reasonably within 30 minutes, and you agree that yes, there is a misapprehension about the importance of cultivating security internally, and you agree that that fear drives an obsession with security, which is misplaced, and causes people to diverge from traditional ways of interacting with each other decently, then it necessarily follows that my contention is correct. So you see that there is an internal structure to task A, or to a good logical argument. My introduction narrows or acknowledges the theme that we're talking about, wealth or property, but I can't talk about the whole topic. There could be multiple books written about that. So I need to talk about an aspect of it. And then essentially I end up, it's like a spear point. I end up at the end of my introduction with my single strong opinion. And by the way, you should write this down. It's a good point. Something that really, really helps force you to write in this very logical way is when you come up with your contention, which should be the last line of your introduction, say to yourself in your head, the single strong opinion that I am going to argue for the remainder of this essay about the focuses that I've mentioned, which you would have done in your introduction, is, and then you write your contention. The single strong opinion that I have about the focuses that I mentioned that I'm argue for the rest of the essay is, and then I would say my contention. So fear leads into security, blah, 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 right? And then your topic sentence do the same. The single strong point that this paragraph will argue in service of the proof of the contention is, I'll say it again, the single strong point that I'm going to prove plausible for the rest of the paragraph in service of the contention is. This forces you to do two things. It forces you, one, to write something that does lead into the contention. So to write logically, linearly, clearly. It also forces you to have one point, which aids concision, clarity, and succinctness, all qualities that ACE are looking for, and mentioned in the psychometric, the list of 10 psychometric properties that I have in the philosophy of section 2 success, which I suppose we can go into later, or just get the book. And it forces you to write in service of the contention. If you're doing all those things, you probably, I mean, all that's left to do is to have good ideas. We were discussing earlier about how language and structure isn't assessed in isolation or in a vacuum, but it's assessed in service of the thoughts and ideas. If you're doing this, your language and structure is probably good because you've got a point, you're arguing a point, you're on topic. And then the conclusion just becomes, well, given point 1 true and given point 2 true, it necessarily follows my contention is true, drop my mic. Boom. And then if you've done it well enough, it is mic droppy enough that there's like this almost lingering sense of not quite quiet, but at its best, it's like, how it occurs to me is like an old martial arts master that like some young upstart has like challenged and he doesn't know that he's like a master. And then, the master just really gracefully just like drops him. But then you reach your hand out and you pick him up, which is why I take care in my conclusions. I was saying earlier about jumping to different trees in the orchard to grab different intelligences. If I have argued logically, analytically, precisely, surgically, it is now judicious, wise, intelligent, high yield to swap gears and go into an entirely different faculty. Once I've dropped the mic, I then take care to pick the person up. So I go, look, this is one view. I acknowledge there are other views. It is not practical or reasonable to think that we're all going to link hands and sing Kumbaya. Or, I might say, there are other people that what was my point? Fear, insecurity, and misapprehension. Cool. So it is completely the right of anyone to define security or the importance of coming to security internally versus externally in whichever way they like or which suits them and their interests and their happiness. Just because it's mine doesn't mean others need to share it, but we don't need to all share it to progress this point. So what I've done there is I've acknowledged that there are limits to my own view, that my view isn't objective, that there are other views and that they are valid within their respective ontologies too. And then I go, we don't need to agree. I don't need to impose mine on you, and you don't need to impose yours on me. There's actually an overlapping area here. And I find an overlap. So you, for example, might think that it's totally fine and good and whatever to, a capitalist or a billionaire might be like, no, I'm really happy with my external wealth. And I might be here, not a billionaire and, a pauper and a monk, and go, well, actually, you're mistaken, and the security that you've worked your whole life to achieve, which could be taken from you in a moment and which you're fearful of, you could just have internally, and I don't need anyone to do that. But, we can both agree that regardless of how we individually define security, there is benefit in interacting with one another when our security is threatened in socially productive and respectful ways. So for example, during COVID, even when we do feel fearful or that there is a lack of security, there is a benefit in a consensus of the worthiness of treating each other with dignity nonetheless. So I've said, here's my view. I acknowledge there are others. They don't need to reconcile, but hey, look at this overlapping area. And what this shows is an ability to reconcile disparate worldviews. Often in medicine, there is a team leading dimension. And if you have the ability to reconcile different worldviews, then it's another point. And then I'll usually finish off my task days with kind of a figurative hook and kind of show that more, not creative writing, but that kind of ability to be poetic or stylistic. Now, it's in my space right now that people are like, what the fuck? Obviously, you don't need to, I'm just telling you what I did. But that's how I do task B differently. I'm not sure if we really have time to go into the nuance of that. I do it entirely differently. But I do explain it in... I've got a blog on task B aesthetic. I need to write like a book on task B. It's on my list. But I do have a blog on task A that's very long and goes into way more depth than that. I've written like 70,000 words in the past few months on this stuff. So as Dr. Scott Fraser pointed out, more than a thesis. So I can't really explain it all now, but that was a really long-winded way of answering that. Sorry, guys. I've been the only one that's talked for like ages. Does anyone want to... I guess I'll just go through these chats. Arshad, do you have anything to say about that, or I'll just totally like scare everyone?
No, dude, that was solid. I don't have much to say. I think hit it on the head. I zoned out for a bit as well. if I'm being completely honest.
Sorry if I am. Yeah, that was like really long-winded. Did that like answer the question about plan? Okay, so the question was, do I plan? So essentially, yes. That whole process was obviously super long-winded, but you want to practice the sharpen the sword of making a point and then thinking in reverse, what are the premises that would prove this point correct? And then flesh it out from there. So
I agree. And it's like the process of planning, it's individualized to a certain extent. So you guys will each figure out your own process of planning, but it is important to have a process, right? Don't try to do a different style of planning every single week where it's just like, oh, this week I'm going to plan this way. The next week I'm going to plan another way, then another week, and then it's just like a complete mess. Use a couple, I mean, like you should have a process of planning by now, but if it's not too late. You need to figure one out and build it and work through it. One of my friends over here, Siddiq, just wants to say hi. He's our head of section too. At Fraser, Siddiq.
This guy's a legend. He's a little weapon.
Siddiq, are you heading home? All right, so but I think that's the important thing to remember, to define a process that works for you, right? And then once you have that process, master that process, right? So Michael has his process and he's mastered his process. My process is slightly different. I have like sets of questions that I ask myself that help me build to the contention and to the points that I want to make. But again, it's not like Michael and I have to have the same process. I have that process and I've practiced that heaps and I've come to own it and master it, right? So now what you want to do is you want to define what your process is. It can be the same as Michael's, it can be the same as mine, it can be something completely different. As long as you have a process that you know works and that you know how to use, then it's a matter of consistently practicing that planning process so that it becomes well-oiled and extremely efficient, right? So that's what you need to do, right? And that's the process with everything, right? With section 3, you come up with a methodology of breaking down certain types of questions, and then you rigorously practice that methodology. Don't practice without knowing what you're doing, but don't figure out, but at the same time, don't be that person that figures out what they're doing, but then doesn't practice. You need to figure out what you're doing and then consistently practice it. You can't be on either end of the spectrum where you practice without knowing, or where you just figure out what you're doing, but then don't practice at all.
I think we'll move on to the next section. I can come back to question and answer. One other thing about the planning though, yes, do it. But I think as far as timing, I mean, I spent maybe 5 minutes. What you don't want to do is be where you're not planning and then your essay kind of is just being made up on the spot, because it tends to not flow rigorously and linearly. But I might come back to the questions in a bit because we're coming up to 90 minutes. And I'm aware that there'll be a portion of you that see a benefit in learning about more of that, but, you know, maybe didn't get the entirety of what they wanted to get in the time that we've spent here so far. So as I mentioned in the email, Arshad and I have put our heads together and thought about the best way that we can provide resources and prices, or bundle them in such a way that you guys can extract the maximum amount of value from it in section 2. And feeding back to that idea that with the time that's left remaining, if you're using time-saving devices and are investing in the place that will get the highest yield, which in my opinion, and as we've discussed, is section 2, then that would be a pretty good strategy. So what we've gone ahead and come up with is 2 offers, one from the Frasers and one from my end. I hope you guys don't mind if I spend a minute real quick to tell you about it. Before I do, I think after that example with the planning, I put up a picture of it. I'm going to screen share it because I felt that that might have sounded, I knew I was going to end up saying something like that because I know myself well enough, and I found this picture ahead of time, and I'm kind of a bit like that. So sorry if that's how you're feeling, but as I said, I have spent a lot of time in the past 3 months in my Facebook group and writing resources and coming up with them for you guys so that you can go away and kind of digest it in your own time. And then also the Facebook group we have, where you can then go and practice and then get feedback, which I do for free. Earlier in the piece, I played you a recording of Robert and Zoe saying that they essentially felt scared about my essays when they first got the resources, but both have my resources, both have had incredible results. So the second part of that video is more to do with them, and also Daniel Tran, who was the guy who got 90 in section 3 I mentioned earlier, how they've had an experience of applying it even though they were initially afraid or unsure, and the success they've had. Anyway, it might be of value to you. We'll find out. I'll play it. It's a short video, and then we'll come back and I'll let you know what I've got for you. I might need to skip though to D-Tran. Where are you, my man? Here you are.
I think Michael's materials and resources are like good for, you know, everyone. Even for me, coming from like a very weak writing background, I was able to like completely understand and digest and like, you know, absorb his material, his content, his resources.
I think when you see Michael's essays for the first time, you get a sense of shock in what's actually possible with GAMSAT. You start realizing, wait, can I actually replicate this process? Because what he writes is so complex, so nuanced. To me, it looks like a research article that I might write in 30 days, probably.
After seeing Michael's amazing section 2 mark, I decided to buy his book and his essays, and that definitely solved the problem of what good writing looks like for me. I definitely began to understand what I needed to do to improve my section 2 writing.
I think ultimately you can get to the same destination which Michael will take you, but it will take you much longer. It will take you a lot more effort. So what Michael's materials offer you is an express highway to success.
His essays are definitely worth its weight in gold. To date, the most valuable resource I have for my GAMSAT preparation.
Oh, aren't you also sweet? To be honest, that was worth more to me to hear than any of the money I made from books. Okay, cool. So what I have come up with, I'm sure you guys are familiar with my resources, but I thought to myself, what if I could just make a really like stupid discount and do it once and know that I've done my bit for you guys this session. So what I've put together is basically an incredibly heavily discounted price at everything I've got. So you would have heard of the first book, The Philosophy of Section 2 Success. It covers my GAMSAT strategy. We didn't really have time to discuss today the 10 psychometric properties, which are the essential thing being tested for in section 2, which I uncovered through my preparation and which I used to get 91. So you've got the philosophy of Section 2 success with my GAMSAT strategy and the psychometric properties. That I think is on the store for $150. And then on top of that, I've also got my second book, How to Kick Ass in Task A. That took like 6 weeks to write. It's like, I don't know, 22,000 words, 50 pages, something like that. And what it does is it takes you through line by line everything that I learned. See, the philosophy of Section 2 success does cover what it is that separates a 75 from a 90. But I found a lot of people in the group were asking, okay, cool, but specifically, you know, some people, I guess, just wanted like a prescription. So I've literally gone line by line through a perfect response and said, not only what to do, but why. Because you might not want to write in my style, or it might not seem natural to you. But if you understand why each bit is there and what functions need to be achieved in the introduction, however you want to achieve it, then you can go and apply that to your own writing. Because like I said earlier, I didn't want people to feel like, you know, I'm just saying this is how you have to do it or you're not going to score well, because that's bullshit. You can score however you like. But I do think to score well, you need to at least fulfill the functions that I mentioned. Okay. So that's up for $250 on the store at the moment. So we've got the philosophy of Section 2 success with my GAMSAT strategy, the 10 psychometric properties, and then How to Kick Ass in Task A with the line-by-line description. And then lastly, what I've done is I've grabbed my 20 best essays. So in my preparation, I did 43 essays, and I've grabbed the 20 highest scoring. They're all above 80. Obviously, that's in my estimation, but I think well and truly, roughly 8 of them are between 80. 8 of them between 80 and 85. Another 8 or so are between 85 and 90. And then the balance, 4 at least, probably more, but I think there are 4 that are clearly, to be honest, they're better than what I wrote on the day. I was tempted to do it again because I thought I could have done better. I didn't like my prompts on the day. They were really unusual. I can't remember them now. But anyway, the essays that are in that book are better than what I wrote on the day. So, and that's on the store for $349. So all over, we're up to like $749 or something. And if you could pay $749 and not have to sit the GAMSAT again, then that'll be worth it. But obviously not everyone has $749 or not everyone wants to spend it. So what I've gone ahead and done is made a coupon code on my store. I'll just share screen and show you. I don't know if my email client worked, but I had set up that you guys should have received an email with a link. If you didn't, this is it here. The Section 2 sorted pack. So you got the first book with the psychometric properties, this with the line-by-line description, and 20 of my best essays. So you can just basically see exactly what I did and just rip it off. And if you go ahead and pop in March Ready, I think I set it up for, yeah, March Ready, then that will come down $300 to $399. I'll leave it up till midnight or a little bit after, and I'm not going to do it again, at least not this sitting. So I hope that makes possible for some of you guys that want access or saw value in what it was that we discussed today and want more tuition and understanding of how to apply that to your own writing, and then the flow and effect of being able to get on the good Section 2 score and therefore GAMSAT score and hopefully a med interview and med school. And then separately to that, I'm also aware that there's going to be people here that want to have a more personal approach one-on-one. There are necessarily limits to my time. I turn away almost everyone that contacts me. I just literally don't have the time. I'd rather write books where I can, put it in a group and 1,000 people benefit rather than one. So I kind of like sat and I felt bad that I was saying no to people, and there was the books and I work for hours a day in the group for free, but still there's a certain element of a kind of one-on-one mentoring and that kind of dialogue and back and forth that was really helpful to me in my tutoring with Fraser's actually. Shabir was my tutor in Fraser's. In fact, I've got a video somewhere. Where is it? I don't know where I put it. Anyway, he was a Fraser's tutor, and when I ran into him, I'd had a bunch of tutors, as I mentioned, but it was really him that brought me from good to like stratospheric. I've got a question, a bid. It was March Ready, a bid. March Ready. I just chucked it in the chat. So for those that are wanting one-on-one tutoring, myself and Fraser's have come up with a network of partner tutors. Fraser's have heaps of tutors, and I've handpicked 5 or 6 now we've got. Absolute guns. I mean, they're all guns over there and wonderful, decent people. And I say that from the bottom of my heart because I've spent a lot of time with them now. I'm really glad that I met them. Anyway, that's an aside. These guys are understanding of what it is, the kinds of things that I've discussed to you. They also know exactly what Section 2 success looks like. So you can know that you're not spending time with a tutor that doesn't have a very clear idea of what it is, or working to a criteria that they have in their head about what ACE want that perhaps isn't dead on. So you're going to get access to an expert, one of the 5 that we've handpicked that I can vouch for from Fraser's. On top of that, so I can be a part of your progress. I've also arranged it such that halfway through your tutoring series, we'll do a check-in with me, send me some essays, and I'll also provide some guidance to make sure that nothing's being overlooked and that you really are capitalising on all the best information, and that it's not just I'm handballing you over. So you'll get access to the expert mentor. They're handpicked, and you'll get feedback and oversight from me. There are just under 8 or dead on 8 weeks until March 15 or March 17, which is when the sitting starts. And I recommend, I always did at least a tutoring session a week. In fact, pretty much every essay I wrote, I got a tutoring session afterwards so I could adjust and make the necessary connections to the next one. So I've made a deal with Arshad for you guys about getting tutoring once a week with these Fraser's partner tutors. Normally it would be, I'll just screen share again, give me a tick. Here it is. So normally they charge $9.99 for that. Arshad's given us a discount. If you just jot it down, it's shouldn't be hard to remember, 90 plus. There we go. And that'll take $200 off. All right. So work out just $100 a week. For you guys that are feeling like you're paywalled, we've put this 4-1 in here as well. I'll still check in halfway. You can still use the same code, 90 plus. All right, and I'll take, oh God, I can't write, 90 plus. And I'll take $200 off you guys, okay? And out of that, you're gonna know that you're gonna be picked with the elite, you're gonna be in the right hands, and you're gonna have me to oversee your progress. You've still got me in the books as well to clarify exactly what it is, right? So you're gonna be able to capitalize on your Section 2, get the biggest uplift in the time available, and have that flow-on effect to your overall score in GAMSAT. Arshad, is there anything else you want to say? That's most of what I had. I'm happy to take more questions, as I said, until the end. But Azara, the Blueprint Pro course, no, they do have a discount on that at the moment though as well, I believe. Arshad, you guys doing?
Yeah, we do. For that, you can just probably head to our website and check it out. But for this specific thing, it's the books that Michael was talking about and the essay tutoring that Michael will jump in and have a look at how you're going halfway through. But yeah, you can have a look at that as well.
Yeah, so that's a separate thing. But this is just for that one-on-one personal mentoring in the build up to the GAMSAT to make sure that your progress is kind of going along the right path. And as the group's growing, as I said, we've got 1,100 people now. My ability to personally, I still do, but like the time that I have to personally answer every person and give them the attention I'd like to is kind of diminishing as the group grows. So we've got this lovely resource here that I can rely on and know that they're looking after you properly.
Yeah, I don't have heaps more to add. I'd highly recommend watching both of the podcasts we did. The first one was good. I thought the second one, which is on Michael's YouTube channel, is actually better. We get into a lot more specific stuff on that one. I think, but I definitely think have a watch of both of those to get a bit more of the specificities of, I think in one of them, we even do a sample, like we just in the moment, we make an essay plan right there. And we talk through a lot of the different processes, a lot of the things you can think about, so on and so forth. So I would highly recommend watching both of those podcasts. You can have a bit of an insight into my mind as well as Michael's mind. Shabir jumps in one of them as well to kind of talk about the process that he had tutoring Michael and how they worked to the score that he got. But yeah, I think that's something to definitely look into, and hopefully it can kind of further flesh out the stuff that we've discussed today. I probably won't stay too much longer. I did cycle into the city today. I don't know what made me do that. So I'm going to have to cycle like 10 kilometers at like 9 p.m. at night. I don't even know what I'm doing, but I'm trying to burn a bit of the gut fat off. I'm struggling, but this is my way to do it.
For like 2 more minutes so I can get.
Oh yeah, dude. I'll say another 10 minutes or so.
Yeah,
like, yeah, but probably not till 11.
I've put, for those that are asking, I've put the links to the products that we just mentioned in the chat. So you've got the Fraser's link. The code for Fraser's is 90 plus, and the code for mine was March ready. So you can head to the shop and get them. Will the Fraser's discount be available after midnight? I'll leave that with you, Arshad. I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, we'll probably have that discount just for tonight. But like, yeah, again, if you guys ever need any help, feel free to reach out to myself, Michael, and we're always more than happy to think about how we can help you guys and organize things for you in a way that works for you. Any other questions, any other thoughts before I make my way onto my bicycle? Yeah, so Amir has asked a good question over here. So it says, Arshad, I thought Frasers generally like to use the one-word theme, right? So I think maybe this is an important point to discuss, that particular idea of the theme versus the quotes, right? So the way that we think about it at Frasers, and the way that we try to communicate it, is there is an underlying theme that generally exists, right? And it's easy to like pick that theme, but you don't want to stop there, if that makes sense, right? So like the process that Michael went through, okay, he read the different quotes and he understood that the underlying theme was wealth, or whatever it is, wealth, richness, etc., etc. But then beyond that, he kind of understood and extracted the context that the quotes were talking about as well, and added into that the way that he was approaching the essay, right? To prevent that reductiveness overall. Does that make sense, Amir? So it's like, again, it's about finding that balance, right? You don't want to be overly reductive, but you don't want to go into this like highfalutin area where you're just like, you know, detached from what's going on. It's finding that balance between having the direction of the quotes and the underlying theme, but also taking into consideration the context.
I was just answering, I don't know if you were talking about the same thing, I kind of came in halfway through, but Amir said, I thought Frasers generally like to use one word theme.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Cool. I've chucked in my bit about that as well. Winnie, for the Frasers / Michael package, how many private essay coaching sessions do you get? So Winnie, there was I'm offering a discount on all my materials from $749 to $399 on my store with the code MarchReady. Frasers separately have a mentoring bundle that I've arranged for you guys. So you can get mentoring in the build up to the GAMSAT, and you can get 8 sessions for, it basically works out to $100 a session after the discount. You can get either 8 or 4. That doesn't come with my materials, although I will chip in halfway through your tutoring series to make sure that you're on track, answer any questions and provide some further guidance and direction. Oh yes, I did promise that I would show you through my materials, wouldn't I? And my mind map. Is that what we're up to? Could you explain the mind map? Yes, I can, Chris. Clara as well. Does each of the 20 essays come with a quote stimulus? Yes. There are a couple that were, some of the ACER ones I've left out, but I've told you which book it came from. And it's pretty clear from the essay because it was kind of like a bit copyrighty, so I didn't know what to do there, but you should be able to find the quotes pretty easy. Nav says my voice cut out. The Frasers bundle, no, does not come with my materials. That comes with my support halfway through the tutoring series. My materials are from my shop. An example of a hook. All right, I might show you guys my materials before I get like bogged down in questions. I will answer them all, don't worry. I get more enjoyment from this than I should. So I will be here for as long as you want me to be. What am I doing? Share screen. Does anyone else ever get nervous when you share screens? Something's going to come up. All right, here it is. I have not looked at this in a while. So what's this? Oh, okay, interesting. I use this so much. Except I said it differently. I'd always be like, freedom was, or the muddy corpse of freedom was squelched into the trenches under the boot of I don't know, tyranny. But that particular phrase is, I guess, muzzling civil discourse. See, this is what I'm talking about. I would listen to little things, and when I sat down for an essay, I would either have these ideas or I can just hear everyone screenshotting words. I have these words that I would always try and I'd jot down if I heard them in like podcasts or books or whatever. And when I sat down to the essay, I'd be like, right, I'm going to incorporate this word or this figurative idea. And I had a little games with myself of trying to link things in each essay. But it's just me personally. But once I had done it, it kind of just spontaneously came up the next time, or if I'd done it once or twice. So because I'd kind of gotten in the pattern of using certain words, phrases, figurative ideas, it all just kind of accumulated and built upon itself, so that on the day, honestly, almost nothing was original. I planned it, but it just, I read in a blog last night that success is like, in order to fell a tree, you just hit the same spot over and over and over. I just kept hitting that spot. And once it just kind of became like second nature. Anyway, so this figure over here is what else? Psychometric features. This was me this is not a full list. This is like very, very early. And I've fleshed this out heaps more, so I wouldn't get too excited about that. This is my game plan. I wrote this like the day before my exam. This is hectic. You don't need to screenshot this. This is in a blog I wrote. I wrote it in the evidence blog, I think. It's pretty hectic. Yeah, okay. So this is honestly, just before I go there, because I can just know that everyone's going to try and copy, just so you know, these aren't complete. The complete versions I've written, these are like just notes. So nothing here is complete. So copying this style or what you're seeing written is potentially going to be more to your detriment than benefit. I moved on from all of these ideas and continue to refine them. And without knowing which specific ones you're going to use or copy in which instance, I really cannot guarantee you that it's a good idea to copy any of this at all. If you want to know what to do, read my blogs. They're free. Read my books or just ask me. With that said, we can have a squeeze. Style reflective. This is all true. You should convey them. What's this? I've moved on from this. Some of this is kind of correct. This is good though. You should pay attention to this for the hook. I've talked about this in a blog, but this is Liv, my friend Liv. This is, when I read this, I was like, I really understood how to start a task B. I've always chewed loudly. I really can't help it. I promise. I've tried everything to stop it, from taking smaller mouthfuls, chewing more slowly, and even eating quieter foods. I guess I just have loud teeth or something. That's not as bad for my brother though. It's so fucking relatable and funny, and it just gets you off guard. And I think that's a very wise thing to do at the start of a task B. I've extrapolated on that in depth in the task B hook blog on my website. You should read that. Yeah, I wouldn't get too excited about that stuff. Should be, this is my phrases tutor. I actually have a whole like book. I won't go into it. I've literally got like so much stuff that he like corrected in me that I've analyzed. So this is me just copying from Wikipedia. You should check out Wikipedia. They've got really good stuff and links to like all these other ideas.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna make a move. Good stuff.
All good, bro.
Yeah, I got a long cycle home. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully you all enjoyed that, and best of luck moving forward. Again, I think the thing that Michael and I always said, and Shabir also talked about this in terms of Michael, your tutor, the person helping you, whatever, they're doing 10 to 20% of the job. 80 to 90% of it is the effort that you put in. They're just kind of like a little extra boost to help you along the way, right? At the end of the day, you can see that while Shabir would have given Michael heaps of guidance, he put in all of that work, right? We see how much notes he took, how much time he spent thinking, analyzing, etc., right? That's the most important thing, the effort that you put in. and the direction that you give yourself, right? Whether you pay, like, and I know I've been saying this for ages, and I know Scott always says it at a masterclass, no matter how much money you pay, if you're not going to put in any effort, you're not going to get a good mark, right? You can't throw 20K at somebody and expect a good mark, right? I mean, like, throw 20K at me, I don't mind, right? But it's like the amount you pay doesn't correlate to a good mark, right? Again, you could not pay anything, and if you put in the effort, the time, and give yourself that direction, you will do well. It's all about the way you think about things, the way you approach things. And I know the annoying part with the GAMSAT is time doesn't always correlate to improvement. Whereas like with university, we know that every extra hour, we can see ourselves increasing in a certain way, right? Whereas with the GAMSAT, sometimes we spend 5 hours of learning, and then in the next practice test we do, we get a worse mark, right? And it can be really frustrating, really, really annoying. But at the end of the day is just keep pushing through that barrier, keep reflecting, analyzing, thinking, and you'll break through eventually and get to where you want to be, right? And I think that's the best advice that I can give you guys. Like, I mean, there's all the specificities that we can go through, but yeah, don't fall into the trap of thinking that time will definitely, you'll see those micro improvements the way you see in university. Or I've spent 5 hours, I've learned this chapter, I'm ready to move on, right? It's not like that, but you still need to keep practicing, keep learning, and you'll get there eventually. Anyway, thanks everyone. Have a good night, and we'll hopefully see you soon. Bye. Michael?
All right,
Cheers,
yeah,
bro.
I'm here.
Go on, man. See ya.
See you, man. Thanks for coming on. That's enough of that folder. There's really not a whole much more to go through. Quotes, evidence. Nothing really of significant worth here that isn't already in my blogs. Let's have a look at what questions we've got. Without making me read the entire chat history again, does anyone want to repeat any questions that they felt wasn't adequately answered? Here they all come. Amir, hey Michael, do you find the ideas-based approach useful? Amir, it's not just about ideas, and it's not an approach. Yeah. When you begin to as your comprehension of the world around you grows, you start to recognize that there are broader narratives like evangelical Christianity and the impact it's had on America and therefore the world, or democracy, the new world that flowed out of the French Revolution and the American Revolution that led to kind of liberal political philosophy entrenching itself and the development of the Western world. Capitalism, technology, globalization, social media, and you start to realize that the world it doesn't organize itself into themes, but there are underpinning narratives and ideas that are so intrinsic to the world around you that they can be related to any prompt, because any prompt is going to arise out of these things. That prompt before about the property and wealth, that arises that out of a context of democracy and capitalism and free market and capitalism and liberalism. So when you start to understand these themes, you can use them to investigate. It's not so much that you're laying the theme on top of the prompt and looking at the prompt through the lens of the theme. That's how most people interpret the Fraser's approach. It's the other way around. It's that the prompt came out of the theme. They're just pointing to you kind of the biggest things that that are impactful. And yes, I do. I mean, that's the essential thing being tested. That's a very broad way of saying it, but essentially what's being tested is what's made from the task, which is a function of how you understand the world around you. And that is intrinsic to the understanding of the world around you at a high level, at least. Where do those relatable hooks come from? Paul, that was my friend Liv. She is in the group. She was in a study group with me. I was helping her. I tutored her during my own preparation. And that was her first ever essay. And I just fucking loved it. So it's from a friend. Tips on task A hooks. It's in my blog. There's a website. I'll just find the link. Here it is, thejohnfox.com. Put it in the chat. Go read this blog and then apply it. How to write short sentences. That talks you through the openings and closings of many of the greatest books of all time. You know, Lolita, Light of My Life, Fire of My Loins. You know, the ending of 1984, He Loved Big Brother. These beautiful, gut-punchy hooks. Read that, that will help you. Mind map, sorry guys. Share screen. Where is it? It's 90 plus GAMSAT. Where would it be? Resources, probably. Mind map, here it is. You're not going to be able to screenshot this one, guys. It's a bit big. But you can see, like, all right, so COVID, response at a national level was undergirded by mythology. So, for example, Sweden or America, feeling that, you know, it's entrenched in the constitution that their civil liberties are being obstructed, so therefore they resisted it. So you can see that there was a national mythology shaped and the varying responses. Concession of political ideals. Okay, I'll go on, but basically you can see you've got COVID, neoliberalism, and that was how it ended up. No, I'm not going to give it all to you because you should go and make one of your own, because this wasn't what got me a good score. It was the making of that got me a good score. The process is, you know, you can't just memorize the whole thing. But when you're in the process of developing your own and interacting with these higher ideas, they just come out naturally when you're writing. What is your opinion on implementing philosophers' ideas? Yeah, definitely do it. I wouldn't base it on... I would always discuss philosophy, psychology, and things like that. I wouldn't structure an essay around it, but, you know, make a point, have an example, evaluate it, and, you know, while doing this, bring in, you know, just different ideas. But I'd say they're embellishments, essential embellishments. You're not going to do like extraordinarily well without using examples, but, you know, you should structure it based on the point that you're making and making a point clearly and concisely, and then use these things to embellish. Sophisticated contention from multiple quotes. Yeah, it doesn't work. I used to do it. You see how I interpreted that quote? Now, I'm happy to argue with whatever marker says that that's not the correct interpretation of that quote, but I'm telling you that no marker is going to put in the effort that I put into that quote. And they're not going to do it for all 5 quotes. And then they're not going... What I used to do is I used to interpret all quotes like I did before with that property one. And then I'd imagine that they all came from a newspaper article, and I'd ask myself, what would the headline of that article be? And so I would genuinely identify what the theme was, but the marker hadn't gone through that process. And they got confused. So I just became pragmatic and I said, fuck it, I'm just going to pick one prompt and make it really clear. What app did I use to organize your notes? Cognio, cognio.com. How did I structure my mind map? I just, as I was reading and accumulating notes from podcasts, they just kind of naturally organized themselves into these themes. And that's when I realized that there were kind of those, you know, narratives that underpin contemporary Western life. That are oftentimes relevant to the quotes. EndNote, I used Evernote was the program, not EndNote. EndNote is a referencing program. Evernote is like a digital notebook. OneNote you can use if you've got Microsoft, or if you've got if you go to uni, your uni should have access to Microsoft Word, and that has you can download OneNote for free. Resources are great for section 2, but based on your experience, do I have suggestions for 3 other than Fraser and Des? I wouldn't recommend Des. ASA is moving away from background knowledge, and Des is very background knowledge-y, so it can be kind of like disheartening. They're really good for section 1. For section 2, it's good, but there's nothing in the Des book that's like above 85, in my opinion. Even 82, maybe. So yeah, they're a bit old now. ASA is the best. Just do your ASA and then note down what questions you got wrong and then return to them. I remember it took me like a week to do my first ASA paper every day. I worked on it every day because every time I got a question I didn't understand, I had to learn the theory. And then, but then when I went back at the end of my prep, I got most of the questions right because I'd saved all the ones I got wrong. So that was reassuring. Do you think you bought some pre-existing ideas? Absolutely. As I said, none of it was original, or very little of it was original. That's the point, is to bring pre-existing ideas to the essays. Like, I mean, it's a test of your ideas. ASA specifically say what's tested is the quality of your thoughts and ideas. You don't bring any ideas, you're not going to score very well. You need to have quality ideas. And then put them on the paper. You're welcome, Namin. Thank you. While preparing, did you consider the quotes in their original context? No. No. Had I have, it would be very high marking if you did. It could be distracting though. Like the amount of words it would take to link it and do it, like you'd kind of deviate from your point too much. So I probably wouldn't have. I considered doing it originally, but I don't think you need to score well. When you spoke about getting 60 and then getting 90, did you get any? Yeah. So I started at a 60 and I progressively built up. I basically hired a tutor until they couldn't help me anymore. And then I got rid of them. And then I started searching, towards the end, I'd keep finding tutors and they'd be like, it's perfect. There's nothing that you need to help with. Or they'd turn me away. And so I started looking for the most brutal tutors. I get tutors where I'd submit him an 80 response and I knew damn well it was an 80 and he'd be like, yeah, it's 62. I'd be like, yeah, no fucking know what you're talking about, mate. But whatever. I'll find out why you think so. Because I don't know that the marker isn't going to share your opinions, ideas about the world. So there is something here for me to find. And I went doggedly looking for anything I could find that anyone could fault. See, most people they can't deal with the discomfort of hearing that something's wrong. I looked for it. I looked for the meanest tutors out there until nobody can fault me. And I hired them, I paid them, and I fired them. But yeah, towards the end, everyone was like, it's in that. If you go to the YouTube, I'll show you. Hold up, I'll share screen. Give me a tip. I'm going to pull up a video. It's just a short clip of my tutor talking about me. It's on my website. I hope I didn't change it. Oh, it's on my YouTube. I might go there. And you can kind of see from his perspective how my approach was different. They ask him what makes me different than any other student, I think, which might give you a valuable insight. Share screen.
What
differentiated him from those that had like an 83, an 85, a 78, an 87, something like that?
That's a difficult question to answer because I think there'll be so many factors, right? I think a particular thing that I noticed with Michael was that he mentioned around the beginning, right? Like he has this energy, and he brought that energy to the tutes. So whenever he came, he was in the driver's seat, basically, of his own learning.
I wanted to get 100, just because someone said that no one could get above 90, and I was like, well, watch me. That's just my personality. So
he's really fine-tuning it to the point where he was like, yeah, he's really fine-tuning it to the point where there's not much left to say about this essay, is there? Like unless.
So anyway, yeah. So towards the end, obviously, people were saying that I got a high mark, and I did the ASA online test as well, and they came back as 85 to 100, which was the top bracket, top 1%. It said. Is the mind map in my package? It's not. Could be if it gets you across the line. Thanks, Jasper. Gautam, does it matter that your extension of the quote might be quite different? As in how I've interpreted the quote, different than what? Maybe clarify that question and we'll come back to it. Navneet, your resources. I was a monk once upon a time, and there was the junior monk that I was roomed with was called Navneet. That name endears me to you. Endears you to me. Your resources are great, but based on your, we've gone through that, sorry. Do you insert other quotes as evidence to support your argument? As in from the prompts? No, I avoided, I started using will often use the words from a prompt as in to make it quite clear that I'm referring to that prompt, but I don't use the full quote. And I initially, where I started, I used it as proof, but it was a bit pedestrian, I think. You know, it got to a point where I had far more sophisticated ideas and things that I wanted to introduce, and, you know, the prompt that everybody had access to. Steps planning, do you insert the steps planning you do before you start writing the essay in the actual exam? So Karina, I've got a blog called How to Approach or How to Nail Quote Interpretation or something like that. Just go to my website, 90plus GAMSAT /blog, and read the quote interpretation blog. So all those are just chapters from my book, so it gives you an idea of what's inside, but that goes into it in pretty explicit detail. I think it's like 5,000 words or something. Zara, I know I didn't really relate to section 2, but can you, I know it doesn't relate to section 2, but can you, it does relate specifically to section 2. Neoliberalism, capitalism. That's a hard thing to answer in sorry to refer to my blogs, but like, I mean, I wrote them specifically to answer the most questions. So you're not going to get a better answer than that's in them. So if your question relates to the blog, you're probably better there than here. But at the bottom of the evidence blog, there are links to 6 articles. 2 of them are quite famous. One from The Guardian, one from the New York Times. I think it's called, let's have a look. Blog, 90plus GAMSAT blog. But the explanation there is far better than I mean, I'll give you my interpretation, but you're not going to do better than these articles, because these kind of introduce the idea of neoliberalism to the kind of world stage. No, back. Here we are. Where is it? There's a good term, zombie neoliberalism. That'd be good to learn about. Here we go. I'll put them here. The rise of zombie neoliberalism and neoliberalism. So read these 2. These are very significant pieces, and that will teach you about neoliberalism. But essentially, there are 3. I mean, I could go on about this forever. I don't know if this is wise. So, like, really short story. French Revolution was marked by the overthrowing of the monarchy and the storming of the Palace of Versailles by the proletariat with their muskets, and kind of the overthrowing of the feudal system, and the installation of these new ideas: fraternity, liberty, equality. The French Revolution was highly influential on the American Revolution, and it was the beginning of the New World. And the New World was conceived on these ideas of essentially liberalism. Liberalism is the position that the individual is the central unit of significance or importance. And so a political system must be designed to preserve one's individual liberty. So classic liberalism designated that the state, the government, should just be the watchman on the hill. So they should have minimal intervention in the affairs of people. They exist only to stop people from interfering with each other's liberty. Over time, after like the Industrial Revolution, and there became kind of a disparity between the capitalists and the factory owners and the workers financially, and this kind of was structurally violent in that the lower socioeconomic classes had less access to education, healthcare, and such, and so it became important, or considered more important, that the state should interfere to assure equitability through things like social welfare, and that's kind of modern liberalism, which took us up to kind of recently. Neoliberalism is a return to the belief that there should be a minimized role of the state. It arises out of a distrust of the essential goodness of the state. By the state, I mean governments. It's characterized by a return to like the free market, the privatization of public things like the postal services. So that's neoliberalism. That's super broad. Capitalism is, I mean, I'm not sure I could describe that as eloquently as neoliberalism. It's essentially an economic principle. I mean, more relevant would be free. You've got to define. I think free market capitalism is, I'm going to go on forever if I do this, and I'm going to bore everyone. Google it, or Wikipedia. Genuinely, actually, it does have really good articles on these things. Amir, what do you think the pre-existing ideas were? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I have lots of ideas about all sorts of things. Yeah, I mean, my ideas are essentially just a reflection of the way I think or understand the world. So yeah, there's lots of ideas. Oh, I think I might have misunderstood that, sorry. Chris, how do you recommend coming up with logical premises? That's, if you just, there'd be like quizzes and stuff. Like if you just Google like, you know, basic argumentation or logic basic argument quiz, and it'll quiz you like, where's the fallacy in this argument? Is this argument, which one of these arguments is you know, has the flaw, and you've got to find it, you know? There'd be heaps of stuff like that. Like logic is like a whole area of inquiry, and you know, there's like fun little logic. Yeah, or just sign up for a logic course in at uni, but there'd be so much stuff on Google. Do you think the info needs to define the scope or the intro, I assume, needs to define the scope and talk about the societal interpretations? By the way, the word societal, everyone just uses to try and sound fancy. Just say social. Just my advice. Define the scope and talk about the social interpretation. I don't think you need to do anything. You certainly don't need to discuss the social interpretations of the theme. I'm not even sure what you mean by social interpretations. I guess you just mean the variety of different opinions on the thing. Define the scope, though. Yes. So you need to. Well, I mean, why would you sit down and write an essay if you weren't in the GAMSAT? Why would you sit down and ever write an essay? You probably have an opinion on a topic, right? Well, you've got to start with what the topic is that you want to talk about. So that's the acknowledgement of the theme. You can't talk about the whole topic, so you've got to talk about a function, an aspect of the topic. So that's the scope that you can deal with, right? And then, you know, it goes down to here's my opinion. So yeah, I think you do need to define and discuss quite clearly what it is that you're talking about and your opinion on the point, and that's the function of a good intro. Daniela, admire the determination. I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but I am quite determined in general, so thank you. Did you have multiple tutors simultaneously? That's a good question. Yes, I did. Yes. Yeah. I also got like 15 people to mark each essay I wrote, like just friends and all that kind of stuff. That guy, Chris, who got 89 overall. We used to study together. Do you suggest defining terms at the beginning? Depends if terms need defining. I often didn't. If I felt it, like in the wealth essay, I would have taken care to, because I think there's a valuable point to be made by you know, not going for the obvious interpretation of wealth as finances. I don't think you need to. Thanks for saying my name so long, Nate. Andrea, not prompts or other quotes. I guess that's in reference to an earlier question, and I don't know what the earlier question was. Sorry, Andrea. Here we go. Do you insert other quotes as evidence to support? Oh, yes. Not necessarily quotes, more ideas. You know, so it'll be like, you know, Martin Heidegger, existentialist philosopher, talked liberally about the Dasein, which is essentially the being here or felt dimension of life. And I'll talk about that. Or I might say, you know, fear arises in what who has the unconscious? Freud. In what Freud would call the unconscious. You know, I'm just name dropping here. You're name dropping people and their ideas to show that I just know them, or can relate what I'm talking about to existing ideas, to kind of ground what I'm saying in something tangible or concrete for the marker. Also, it makes it much harder for them to kind of disagree with if Freud said it. Just to confirm, you identified the overarching theme for a single quote and wrote an essay on that. Did you make it related to the other? I would relate the theme, so the quote, to other quotes if they existed within common ontological or epistemological frameworks, which is like a fancy way of saying, if they were not similar in the sense of, generally the 5 things will be saying, if you look into it, 5 completely different things. Sometimes you get a couple that are kind of like saying the same thing, but opposite. They're saying the opposite thing, but they're like talking about the same thing, but just from different perspectives. So if they're similar in a way that I think can be used cohesively, I might. Generally just one though. How can I evaluate whether my task A or B is stronger? Ask a tutor, I guess. A tutor who knows. You can post it in the group. if you contribute to other people first, my Facebook group. But don't go in there and just post it and expect people to help you. You gotta help people first, but I'm sure they'll tell you. Amir, the ones you brought to the themes. Hey guys, if you can ask a question, can you just remind me like what your thing is in reference to? Because there's so many people messaging and like coming. This joke. Clara, you're welcome, Clara. Good time. Do you know if or think the markers see both essays? I don't think they do. Oh wait, hold up. The markers see both essays. Oh no, I wouldn't worry about that. Just write whatever. I don't know for sure, but I highly suspect that they don't see, that the same marker doesn't read both essays. I use the very similar stylistic devices and like lines in both. I'm almost certain that it's the same, but I don't know for sure, but I don't think the same person reads both. So just each essay in a vacuum. When you decide on what personal experiences to use on your essay, what ones are good to draw upon? Whatever, I don't prepare anything. It just spontaneously came to me. You know, if the theme is laughter, you know, or humor, you know, the thing that came in my mind at the time was I accidentally kissed my baby son with a cold sore once. Thankfully, he didn't get anything. But at the time, my ex-wife was very, very angry with me about my carelessness. And in the middle of her angry fit, she hit over a pot that spilled all over the floor. And there was a moment of silence. And then we both laughed because we saw that, you know, the irony in her telling me that I was being careless. And obviously we all have just accidents. And so, you know, that was just the thing that came up in my mind at the time. But, you know, it came spontaneously to me. But I think preparing is going to make you rigid. Preparing narrative is going to make you rigid and probably not going to work very well. Do you remember your favourite particular Mindful podcast? Yeah, there's some good ones. Abolition of the Police might be the title. Surveillance Capitalism is a great one. Anything on cancel culture. They're all pretty good, man. Like, you get occasional shitty ones, but the Surveillance Capitalism one was really good. What else? They're the only ones that are coming to mind at the moment. But I drew ideas from all of them. Like, yeah. What books did you enjoy reading? I didn't read books. We've actually got to bring up a quote generator and look at the process of picking a quote, identifying a theme you want to write about. Bring a quote generator. Look at your. We did that earlier in the podcast. Sorry, in the webinar. And look at your process of picking a quote. The process of picking a quote is essentially just picking one that I think I have something insightful to say about. So I would, you know, pick whatever you think is going to give you the best result. Be pragmatic about it in that sense. I'll circle back to that. That's actually all the questions, actually. Did I not answer anyone? We still have like 3 pages of people here. So thank you guys for staying with me for like however long that's been, 2.5 hours. Good Lord. Oh, Anna, what a lovely picture you've got there. That's not me like cracking onto someone, I know, Anna. All right, the questions have dried up, so. Are we like sweet or? You guys can like unmute yourself now if you just want to chat. I don't know, I feel like it's a bit weird me just chatting to the thing. Unmute. I've now allowed you to unmute yourself if you wish to talk to me directly. Paul, my language more sophisticated. I'm sorry to go back to the minefield again, but they talk in a very eloquent way. But like you saw in my GAMSAT folder, I had lists. So it still says you're not allowed. Fucking Zoom. I've said allow you to unmute yourself. Wait. Oh yeah, sorry, tick. Allow you to unmute. So now you can unmute yourself. My apologies. Sophisticated words, I had word lists. And whenever I read phrases or turns of phrases from like opinion pieces in like the New York Times that I liked, I would just write it down. And like I said, I made a point to use it in the next essay, so it kind of got internalized like that. By Hannah, and is that right? No. Are there types of creative styles of writing that you wouldn't recommend, such as poems? Yeah, poems. Definitely not. The thing is with a poem is the point of a poem kind of is that it's left to interpret and the marker must imply. So you're connoting what you know instead of denoting what you know. It's going to lead to an immediate decline in concision and clarity, which is not going to serve you well. As far as creative writing in general, if you're just going to write a story, as I said earlier in the piece about the apples and the orchards, you'll collect a few points, a few apples from the lower branches, but as you climb further up that tree, it's going to become harder to get points and you're going to get diminishing returns. Plus, with creative writing, there's a necessary descriptive dimension to it, which is going to take time and space. So I would do it for a bit, but then I would change tacks and critically reason. Hi, Michael. I know you kind of touched on this, but any tips on a great intro and conclusion? It depends whether it's for task A or B. For task A, you can see the Ontology of Structure blog on my blog, the Ontology of Task A Structure. That goes into it specifically. For task B, the task B aesthetic will describe it to you nicely. Zoe, is it okay to connote in a task B, I assume TV is task B, intro narrative? If you mean like figurative, I'd probably need an example, Zoe, of what you mean to answer that better. So if you can clarify, I'll come back to that. Nah, thank you so much, Dino, appreciate it. No stress, man, or woman, sorry. It's like either binary or gendering you. So willing to impart their knowledge, especially in a free platform. You're very welcome, thank you.
Hi, Michael. Sorry, I just had a question. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, no, sorry if this is a bit weird, but
I'm so happy to hear someone. It's like weird talking to a screen. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. So I think, yeah, I really I think your structure and the way you, one of the biggest things I took out of your podcast with Fraser's was the fact that you said about situatedness, like about making sure that you're not just saying blatantly that, you know, capitalism is bad, where, you know, capitalism's been dominating, you know, global economies for like years. And actually just sort of saying that these are coming from, you know, my perspective, which, you know, as a 20-year-old or, you know, whatever it is, and they do have some, you know, counter arguments or, you know, counter perspectives. So I think that was quite good. Oh, wait, did I understand that correctly, or?
I'm not sure I understood you correctly. I mean, I got that you listened to the podcast and liked the situatedness, and then I didn't quite get the last bit.
Yeah, no, so in terms of, I think you mentioned you thought it was quite like naive to say to a marker that, you know, my view is best, and like sort of ignoring the fact that, you know, it's so much more complex and, you know, nuanced.
Well, yeah, I mean, the point is that it's very binary. Firstly, it's a moral judgment on something, which what place do I have to do it with limited experiences? I mean, I've got 29 years as a male of a certain socioeconomic class on one small corner of the world. How can I then, you know, project that my experience and ideas are shared by, for example, I don't know, a homosexual African from the 1500s? You know, we would have just such different experiences, ideas, beliefs that, you know, you can't reconcile those existences in such a way to be able to say that I can absolutely say that this person experiences that way, you know, and that's just one perspective. So I wouldn't even say if it were my perspective that capitalism is bad, because that's moral. I could say if I had that perspective, I think capitalism is destructive and exaggerates the worst qualities of humanity. But that's a perspective. That doesn't mean that I'm right. From my perspective, it looks right. But you know, if I had one different experience, that might have changed that perspective. And if my perspective is so liable to change based on that one experience that I could have or not have had, I can't say absolutely that that is true with a capital T. I can just say it's true from where I'm standing. And so you start to move away from that binary exposition of the world around you and start to, you know, see that the shades of grey.
Yeah. Cool.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask in terms of your essays, or especially task Bs, do you feel like starting with a story, or like not a story, but just like a reflective piece to at least sort of flesh that perspective out a bit more and give a bit of, you know, situatedness to your essay could be a good idea?
I narrate, yes, I give a story that has that. I set up a story that gives me an ability to distill something from that story that shows insight into the theme. Then I reflect on that story from my perspective, but from maturity now, and then from the other person's perspective to show that I can appreciate things like, you know, with objectivity and altitude. And then I also use that as an opportunity to go into situatedness and discuss how, there are necessary limits to my empathy, but that necessitates my sympathy. So I can suppose what this person might feel or think about this, so, or experienced of me in that moment, but I can't know for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And do you think like that sort of little reflective piece at the start as a standalone, and then going into your sort of normal-ish, maybe with a reduced introduction, could that be a good structure? Or do you think like in terms of task B?
Read the task B aesthetic blog, man. It's like literally right. It's like written all there, exactly what to do for each bit of a task B.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's going to be more to it. Like I can't, it's like the framework, same as like the ontology of structure task A blog is like the framework, but I wrote 21,000 words or something like that on it in the task B book, how to kick ass in task A book. So I've got like more to say on it, but as far as if you're just wanting like the actual physical structure, like what I did in the task B, it's in the task B aesthetic blog.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool, bro. Zoe, wait, hold up. Zoe to everyone. In my last essay, I ended on, it was the revolution they needed to use service system. Yeah, Zoe, like you address the argument in that essay for your body paragraphs, so it's okay to finish on, it's good, in fact, to finish. There's a reason I brought up that apple tree thing is to say that, you've got the narration, but if you've properly, critically analyzed the theme and shown depth and insight in the rest of the essay, it's nice to feel like that what you've done there is a hook. It shows a different aspect of your ability to write. It's stylistically different, and it lingers at the end. The final hook, you want it to linger, because that's the moment where they choose your mark. So no, I think it's absolutely right. Although I wouldn't call that connotation necessarily. Like you might not be writing explicitly or critically, but you're still denoting your thoughts about your dad. Connoting would be like, I don't know, talking about, some people talk about Elon Musk and they leave it to the marketer to assume who Elon Musk is. And they might know. You're connoting who Elon Musk is by the context of how you're talking about him. But I would say Elon Musk, CEO of electric car manufacturer Tesla, and that's denoting. I think you're conflating, Zoe, connotation with figurative writing, and they're different. You can figuratively denote. I hope that answered a bit more. John, no worries. Thanks so much, and thank you for the discount. Okay, to get that. Okay. Pranitha, if you don't have relevant personal anecdotes to incorporate in your essays, well, you do have relevant personal anecdotes. If you can't think of them, fair enough. But I mean, you've had millions of experiences. What would be the next best way to incorporate a personal touch to your essay? The reason for me putting in an example from my history wasn't to put a personal touch to it. It was to set up an opportunity to distill something from that about the theme, and to set up an opportunity to reflect on that from maturity, and therefore showing objectivity and neutrality, and then to reflect on the antagonist point of view to show my ability to step in someone's shoes and set up an opportunity to example my awareness of what I call situatedness. If you'd like to know more about that, there's the YouTube, if you go on the Fraser's YouTube channel, the video of me goes into the discussion of situatedness. Yeah, I don't just do it for personal touch. Everyone that's saying like, thank you so much and goodbye, but by the time I read it, they're gone. For anyone that's planning to go ahead of time, you're very welcome. Hey, I have a request. Can you guys just come off chat? Because I want to hear some voices. I'm like getting bored of looking at the text.
I'll speak. I'm wondering, but yeah, thank you. Like everyone said, I think it's awesome that you're doing this. I'm wondering, you said you studied for like 14 hours to 18 hours. Like, where do you think that ability to concentrate comes from? And how can
medication?
Right. Okay.
I'm copying out of myself. I did use medication. Like I have a medication for ADHD, which helps, but no, that's actually untrue. I was studying as much before I started my medication. About halfway through my sitting, the medication just helped me focus more because I was getting diminishing returns because I was kind of like, I got ADHD, so like sometimes like things get a bit blurry. I was still sitting there for as long beforehand, so I was kind of being facetious there. Where does the motivation come? I have always had unusual energy. I'm not a very ordinary person. Whatever I do, I throw myself into, so I don't do anything half-assed. So that's just kind of my personality. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm obsessive about things. That's just what I did. If you don't want to do it, the thing is, I never forced myself. I don't ever force myself to study. I do it because I want to. If I ever had a day where I sat down and wasn't feeling it, I got up and did something else. Or I did section 3 instead. Whatever I was doing, the wind was behind my back. You have to do that. You can't force yourself. It's not going to work. So if you haven't got it in you to study that long, you're not going to help anyone by doing it. You just need to strategize to make effective the time that you can productively sit. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Will there be a recording of this so I can watch? Yeah. Yeah, Alex. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Zoe. Any other questions?
Sorry, so another question. So with what you're planning to do, like, what do you think? Have you applied for med schools for next year, or are you are you going to apply for the other year?
I've still got to finish off my undergrad, so I'm going into my 3rd year. So I will apply for med school in, I think it's May or June that we have to apply.
Oh, that's cool. And have you got any dream schools that you want to go to and stuff like that, or?
I don't dream. I just say what I want and then get it. And I'm going to go to Melbourne Uni.
Nice. Cool. I was curious.
Oh, was that abrasive? No, I just, yeah, I'll go to Melbourne. That was super abrasive. I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to be rude. I send your ideas and blog about the introductory hook, but do you have any tips on making a parallel equivalent for a strong conclusion? I wrote about that in my book. I can't just make the whole book a blog, but essentially it's, if you read that John Fox thing I posted earlier in the thing about short sentences, it's similar, but it's, the introductory hook has kind of not an inquisitive feel, but it invites further discussion, whereas a really good hook at the end of the conclusion has a finality about it, a closure and a lingering, poignancy. Poignancy is often effective, but it wants to have a sense of closure. You kind of like pace it, and then it comes, and then it really needs to have a very, it's this real, I don't know why I do that, but it's how it occurs to me. It's like this real, this silence.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your explanation.
All good. No, I'm currently working full-time. Any suggestions on the #1 priority in terms of Section 2 preparation, given very limited time? It's hard to answer that question, without knowing how much by the way, guys, my request, use the voice function, please. Preparation with you, the host. Yeah, can't really say that without knowing where you're up to. You can tell me and then I can answer.
Did you ever memorize essays, or would you recommend memorizing essays, or would it just be like ideas?
That's a different Zoe, right? We've got 2 Zoes here, right? Is that Zoe Lee?
Yeah.
Excuse me, young lady. Memorizing essays? That is not a question you should be asking. No, you shouldn't memorize essays, Zoe. You should write the brilliant essays that you already write. No, Asa say in the information book, the line is, what is it? it's something along the lines of pre-prepared responses will score very lowly, is essentially but they don't say a lot about how they're marking section 2, but they take care to say that. It's one of like the 3 or 4 things they say about section 2. So given that, I would encourage you not to, because it's just not going to be relevant. Like it can only have, like, intrinsic to the approach is that there's going to be a degree of departure from direct relevance by doing that. And if you want to write at an elite level, it needs to be directly relevant. Yeah, I would avoid canned material, especially that introduction that everyone does. Theme is a topic that has been contentious over the past 100 years. Don't write that. Everyone writes that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
This is Gautam, sorry. So during the exam itself, how much time did you spend preparing and, planning, and how much, or did you have any issues with time when you were writing?
Yeah, like it's a time pressured exam. Like, you're kind of always scraping at the last minute. But the problem is, if you don't plan, you're going to write an essay that's, maybe you'll finish earlier, but you'll have written shit. So like you do need to plan. If you've got a 30-minute essay, I actually read someone who scored highly, and they spent like 12 minutes planning or 15 minutes planning or something like that. And they just like bust out the essay. I wouldn't recommend doing that.
No, I don't think so.
Look, man, you got to find your own style, but like realistically, I can't imagine you coming up with a good plan in any less than 3 minutes.
Okay. Did you see the amount of time? Sorry, go ahead.
I probably wouldn't spend more than 5.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't spend any less than like 2.5, 3, like at minimum.
Was it something that you saw becoming more efficient as you were writing essays? Like initially it would take you 15 minutes to plan, and by the time you got to the end, you'd thought about so many different topics so much that it came out in 3.
Yeah, because like you'll when you get in the habit of like, you start noticing that the same kinds of examples and ideas start to crop up in different essays. So I'll write, for example, you'll be able to write like paragraph 2, you'll be able to write like a 1 or 2 word placeholder for an idea that you already know how to write out in full.
Yep.
So like, for example, I might go like Holocaust, but the Holocaust to me, I know like is this beautiful fucking, few lines, or like depending on how many lines I want to give this particular essay, but I could write a perfect paragraph on it. So start to, as you get in the routine and you start to be able to, yourself well enough that you can kind of just jot down. But it's kind of like you've got to have the balls. I shouldn't say that, but you've got to have the. I feel like it disenfranchises the strength of women. It's
courage.
Courage. You've got to have the courage to stare in the face of death, and by death I mean the time limit of section 2, and really sit there and go no, and breathe, and think clearly, really be considered. You'll notice if you go on my YouTube channel and watch the most recent video I did.
Okay.
We did a live essay plan, and I was sweating balls, man. Because is that the expression, sweating balls, sweating bullets?
I think either way.
Because I was like, everyone's going to be looking, and I was like, they best give me a topic that I like know about, or like I best be able to do this well. I haven't written an essay in a while now. And he gave me and then when I was watching the video back, I noticed on my face the very thing I did at the start of the exam, at the start of section 2, which is he gave me this topic. It was completely unprepared. He gave me a quote, and I sat there and I went, and I let the recording be silent for like a while, and I planned in my head, and then I spoke. And then what I said, I thought was brilliant. So you need to be able to have the confidence to forget the time and know that it's like the coiling of a snake and then the release. You've got to let the snake coil, the energy build, and then you release it powerfully. So without that period to build, and by build, I mean consider, investigate, interrogate, cohere these ideas into a whole that works in a linear and an instructive and insightful fashion, without doing that exercise at the beginning, it's quite impossible to do it right.
So maybe like,
Michael.
Sorry, I'll let someone else talk. Thank you.
Sorry, go.
No, you're right. You're right.
Just quickly, were you quite strict with your timing in terms of 30 minutes for each essay, or are you quite flexible with that?
More or less, yeah. I'm trying to remember if I ever went out. I do tend to write my task Bs faster than my task As. They tend to be slightly shorter. So I know just because I'm used to writing a lot, I know in the back of my mind that I've got like an extra few minutes up my sleeve for an A if I need to. But I also try and allow time to go back and slash things out of my essay. Like the last couple of minutes, I try and go back and just delete. Just like delete. Like anything that's like not expressly needed for the point that I'm making, I delete, because then it makes it much more concise and succinct. So yeah, I mean, it depends on your style. I know I write my task A's are lengthier, so I would probably be a little bit flexible. Like I'm never rigid about anything necessarily. I always like flow with it, but I would broadly recommend to just practice to half an hour each.
Yeah, I try to do that, but I always tend to spend more time on task A than task B because B is easier.
Okay, well, if that's the case with you, I'll time it, like, or do the 2 in the hour and just work to the hour.
Yeah.
You know, whatever works. There's no rules.
Thank you. Yeah.
Do you think typing the essay is better? I mean, yeah. I used to do type tests in the mornings to like increase my typing speed. That's just me being obsessive. I mean, I guess that's a matter of personal preference, whether you like typing or writing. I'm answering a chat if anyone's wondering why I'm talking.
I understand that. I'm a typist, so my job is practice.
Lucky you. That works out well. Anyone else?
Hey, Michael.
Hello, Michael.
Oh, sorry, no, you go ahead.
Okay. So I was just wondering, first of all, thanks so much for doing this. I was just wondering specifically with task A, topics come up like democracy, globalization, so on. Just wondering, when you were building up like a repository of knowledge on those things, did you like take notes or?
Yeah, definitely. You saw them in the GAMSAT folder earlier. Yeah, I mean, like, when I started, I went like Wikipedia has really good articles for political ideology. So I started to get like a comprehension, and then I started to read like the opinion pieces in publications, what they had to say about it, to get kind of a broad context. And then it was more understanding the nuance and the implications of these things rather than understanding them in a vacuum, which was like listening to podcasts and kind of taking more sophisticated notes about it. And then there was the process of incorporating those notes and ideas. I never just had ideas and memorized them. I was always like, oh, this week I've learned this, and then I would make a challenge to myself to incorporate it somehow in the next essay that came up. Maybe it's just my thinking, but whenever I apply something, it kind of just stays in my head after that. So I was always just kind of playing a game with myself to apply things that I'd heard that week. But yeah, definitely always building up. It's just a constant, it's not an unprompted thing on the day. You build up words, figurative ideas, phrases, structures, you integrate it into your existing understanding of how to approach the task. You build different, you expose yourself to higher order thinkers and really intelligent people. And, so on the day, there shouldn't be anything left to guesswork. It really wouldn't have mattered what topics you gave me on the day. I still would have done well.
Cool. Cheers. Thanks for that.
Is it Shagun or Shagan?
It's Shagun. Yeah, I know. My name's a bit tricky.
That's right. I got my head now. It took me a while.
That's okay. I had two kind of broad questions. So I was reading your essays and I was wondering how you go about approaching your first and second body paragraphs.
It depends on the task.
On both, yeah, on both of the tasks.
That's a very involved question. The first I mean, I went over that earlier in the webinar for task A. So there's the logical underpinning of it. So the topic sentence introduce, I say in my head, the single point that I'm going to argue for the rest of this paragraph in service of the contention is, and then I write my topic sentence. That topic sentence feeds into a proof of the contention. Then the basic structure of a task A is PEEL, P-E-E-L, point, example, evaluate, link. So I give an example to ground the point that I've made in reality, something concrete that the marker can physically understand. So like their RAM, like as in computer RAM in their head, isn't like being taken up by trying to understand what I'm talking about. Like they can go, oh, it's that thing. So when I give an example that's concrete to them, it frees up their mind a bit to pay more attention to me. Then I evaluate the example in light of the theme, and then I link what I've said directly back to the contention. So that's PEEL. That's also covered in the ontology of structure blog on the blog. And then for task B, my body paragraphs are different. The first one is I start with the significance this narrative is in its telling commentary on, and then I say how the narrative gives insight into the theme. And then I reflect on the theme of the narrative from my perspective, but from maturity now, and then from the antagonist perspective. And then I do the situatedness bit. And then my second body paragraph in a task B, I go as I look more broadly afield to contemporary society or history, philosophy, psychology, whatever. I see some further links, and I then contrast this idea that I've distilled from the narrative and see how it plays out in contemporary society, or was discussed in history or philosophy or whatever, to kind of reflect on it more critically. And I'd use the PEEL structure for the second body paragraph of a task B personally, and that was gone over in the task B aesthetic blog. So the two blogs you want to see if you're after structure is the task B aesthetic and the ontology of task A structure.
That's so helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I was reading through your essays, and I spent like a week just trying to figure out how you're like writing them. Sorry, my voice is really shitty. I've got a cold right now.
That's all good. Which ones have you got? You got the first book, didn't you? Philosophy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got aesthetics, space. Wait, I've got them like stuck on my thing. So I've got chance and globalization.
Yeah, okay. Globalization particularly is very structured. So you should be able to have a very deliberate structure. Space, that space was a task A though, wasn't it? Yeah. Because space is a very esoteric type thing, and it's kind of got some philosophical links and underpinnings, I did take a more figurative approach to space than, as you can see, for example, in globalization. But still, there still should be the backbone of task A structure, which should be logical. It just was kind of fleshed out more figuratively than usual. But both task Bs, would you say, chance and aesthetics? Oh,
well, aesthetics was actually task A, but you wrote it in a task B style.
Yeah. They'll both have a narrative in the first paragraph. They'll both have significance is, and then a reflection from me and other in the second. And then they'll both mention situatedness at the end of the second paragraph, as first body paragraph. And then they will both link to contemporary society in the second body paragraph, and they'll both conclude in similar ways as the task A's. So you should be able to see the structure from those ones.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you so much for your time today.
No worries. Hey guys, I'm going to be back in literally 2 seconds. I'm going to take a whiz. Right, I'm back. Okay. I spent 6 months prepping for GAMSAT, and section 3 mostly just ASA. For section 1 I did ASA as well, but I gave up on it because I disagreed with the answers. And I was like, well, this is probably not a very high yield way of spending my time.
Hey, Michael.
Man, what's up?
What were I remember you mentioned something about some kind of like 10 qualities but I missed exactly what you were referring to. Is that referring to what section 2 is trying to test in terms of psychometrics?
Yeah. So section 2 isn't a test of writing, it's a psychometric test. They set up, not a trap, but they set up an opportunity for you to, because there's a lot to do in a short period of time, and you're under pressure, it forces you to reveal yourself essentially. And then in what you reveal, they're probing it for qualities of doctors that they want to see, and just high order thinkers in general. And so, yeah, the 10 things I'm referring to are the 10 psychometric qualities that they're probing for in the highest scoring responses. And that's discussed in my first book, The Philosophy of Section 2 Success.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. No prep courses. I had a Section 3 tutor, Daniel Tran. He's the guy my friend talked about. I didn't get a tutor for Section 1. Prep courses, just tutors. I paid for like mock exams from like Fraser's and med prep and stuff like that. But mostly just use the ACES materials.
I just had another question in terms of Section 3 and how you said you kind of just like reverse engineered Section 3 in terms of ACES tests and filling in gaps in knowledge. Did you fill your gaps in knowledge? Like what resources did you use?
Section 3, sorry.
Yeah, in terms of filling in like knowledge gaps.
Khan Academy. I mean, it wasn't. I just went through, and any question I didn't understand, I just Googled it. There were a variety. There wasn't really a resource, but like, I just went looking for the answer. Like the internet can pretty much answer any question, and if there were topics that weren't making a great deal of sense, I then went to a tutor. But Khan Academy is pretty good. The ACE GAMSAT Bibles go into more depth than is necessary, in my opinion, but it was kind of a list of everything that I needed to know. But it was more just the thing is when you start with ACER, and if the problem I originally had was I would do Section 3 and I'd learn, like, let's say I got a lens question, so a physics light refraction type question, right? And they're like, okay, cool, I know fuck all about this. I'll go and learn it. And I'd learn it, but because I learnt it in reverse, next time it came up, if there was a variant on it that I hadn't learnt, I stumbled. So my first section was kind of reverse learning things that way. But then I realized at a point I needed to, instead of learning retrospectively, I needed to learn forward. So then after I had a pretty a workable idea of each of the topics from doing what I had done, I then got tutors to take me through more of the basic concepts. And because ACE are a lot these days moving away from pre-required knowledge and more trying to investigate your ability to manipulate the kind of base principles and the first principles of certain things.
Okay, so you just need that foundation kind of. All right, thanks.
How are we going?
Hey, sorry, it's me again. How did you come up with the idea that Section 2 was a psychometric test? Was it just based on you looking at people's essays who'd done really well and what the common theme was throughout them? Or?
Shabir, my Section 2 tutor, drew my attention to the psychometrics.
Okay.
That was a Fraser's idea, actually. Well, actually, he showed me some of them. The word psychometrics came from him.
Okay.
But he kind of had like 4 or 5 or 4 that he showed me, 4 or 5. And then I filled out the rest, essentially.
Okay. Cheers.
I'm surprised that there's 2 pages of people hanging around. just to listen to other people's questions, I guess. Whoever's typing questions, I am not going to read them if you don't ask them to me.
Hello. Sorry about that.
What's up?
No, I just want to say thank you. Yeah, definitely with every question people ask, you get a lot of answers anyway. And every time I listen to your webinar, well, today the webinar, but your videos is like the whole day. Then I think about different things. So it's a lot to take in.
I'm glad it's useful.
I do have a little bit of a personal question, and
Yeah.
I do have a son as well. How do you juggle everything? Because even though you hint, but no, you didn't hint. You said ex-partner or something, so you probably share the care of your son. But things happen. They get sick, this and that. How did you juggle responsibilities with
I have
obsession?
my week, and she has in the other half.
Yeah.
So I mean, in a way, that kind of cut my time in half. But firstly, my son's very well behaved. Like, he's very well disciplined, so he doesn't demand my time in such a way that, like, I would often have my at the start of the Minefield podcast, it has like the generic, this is an ABC podcast. Yeah. And like my son, as soon as he heard the music, would be like, this is an ABC podcast, because he knew it was coming. I was so used to me listening to ABC podcasts in the background while he potted around and we played games, because I could still think, because he's well behaved or disciplined, he didn't behave in ways that required me to use my mind in such a way that I couldn't be doing other things. So I had podcasts on in the background and I reflected. Also, he sleeps, like he naps during the day, so I had 2 or 3 hours to do, an essay or two while he napped. But also, it is important with section 2 at least, the relaxation phase of, okay, so when you have, let's say you said when you listen to my videos, you spend the rest of the day thinking, right? What I've done is I've agitated an idea that you have about the world. If you imagine, like, those snow globes or even sand, whatever, like it's agitated it, right? And things are up there. And then they kind of congeal together in new ways. And then you got to let it sediment and fall back down, right? And then it reorganizes itself into this, it's no longer taking rammed like process. It's there now, integrated, you understand it, right? That process takes conscious relaxation. Yeah. So I'd go hard in the week, or I'd use like these podcasts and or things, and I would allow time with my son to, yes, consciously be with him, but also to allow my mind to integrate what I'd learnt, and also to, when you come to that place of relaxation and let things settle, then to use that clearing that is left after that for intuition. Yep. So I'd use intuition to be like, okay, like I've now got an idea of what I need based on what I think and the things I've done. But then I've also got this kind of, from that relaxed place, this kind of intuitive feel of this is what needs to be done now, or this is the direction I need to go for the next week.
No, that's great. That's great. That's fantastic. I think relaxation is just so important to switch it on. And with kids, I guess, you know, when you're present or you're playing a game or doing something, you also, it could be 15 minutes of running in the park, and that just, help that processing, I think, in your brain. So no, thank you. I have the I hear people saying, oh, I don't have enough ideas. I have far too many ideas. Any topic you give me, I can give you the most bizarre angles, but that's the problem in 30 minutes, right? Give me 3 days and I do it. So it is about how do you commit to one contention or something that you can bring.
It really doesn't matter what contention you choose. It makes no difference, because the contention is just a vehicle, or your line of reasoning is just a vehicle for your conveying of the psychometric features. One of which, or some of which, is concision and clarity. Yeah. So what particular contention you pick is irrelevant. Picking one and arguing it concisely is something that's being prompted.
No, that really changes my mindset. So that has helped a lot, because I was thinking how I'm going to choose so quickly the killer contention.
Flip a coin in your mind. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
All it says is that you argue it like sequentially and logically and concisely.
That's right. And I think what you're saying about all the different intelligence that this test is testing, I don't know, in a way it really set me free, because I feel that I know I can prove that. I know I have that. So, but I never thought, well, okay, now I can write about it in half an hour. So, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Good luck, everyone.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Well, firstly, I'll just say one thing that I think is really cool that you talking has helped me do is like having the courage to sort of back myself, like not necessarily listening to everyone around me. So that's really cool. I'm going to definitely do that. But in terms of like the minutia of how you said you wrote a list of little things to try and incorporate into your essays, would you be very surgical about it? Would you put it in and you were like, I'm going to put this idea into this place and really try and consciously place it? Or was it a bit more free? It was like, I'm just going to...
It's fluid.
Yeah.
Like I'd have a word, like I might want to use a figure of expression, like, you'd need a ladder to tie my shoelaces, or, or like, or rent comes due even in the ivory tower, or just a little thing like, and it would be in the back of my mind and it would just kind of come up somehow in the essay. I definitely didn't premeditate putting in a word. I wouldn't have spent that much energy or investment of kind of mental energy on something as trivial as trying to include a word.
Does that include ideas as well?
See, it depends. Like if I've just read an essay, I saw a podcast on surveillance capitalism, and then the essay is laughter, like there might not be a naturally flowing link. So I'm not rigid with it. Maybe I'll use an example that was from last week, or maybe I had two examples this week that I could draw from. So like if it didn't fit, I wouldn't force it, but I would have a strong preference for trying out this new material, because I know that, I can only write so many essays in the build-up, and I know that each time I do something once, it's kind of internalized. So I would try and... I have a preference for using the new stuff, but ultimately you do whatever's going to get the best mark.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Hey, Michael, I just want to quickly thank you for organising this webinar. One question that I had was, I really struggle with the task B structure, because I feel like I'm a persuasive and argumentative, like I just try and usually adopt that structure, like a very task A. And I sort of struggle talking in the first person tone and remaining like sounding sophisticated at the same time. Like I just feel like as soon as I start talking in first person, I just become sort of informal in a way. So what sort of tips would you have for task B and sort of still remaining sophisticated and not becoming too much argumentative or having that task A structure?
Firstly, I'd say relax. You sound tense. Not like right now, but like when talking about it, you sound tense. And tension is an impediment to flow. If you're holding on to something tense, you can't flow, and writing is a creative flowing process. So my first advice is there's nothing that I would say that would be more useful to you than relax. But to actually answer the question, firstly, you can write 2 argumentative essays. That's fine. There's no prescription that you need to do it any one way or the other. You're welcome, Mohammed, by the way. That was someone messaged me. You can write 2 argumentative. Many people do that and do well. The issue that task B ideas tend to, task A deals with interpersonal issues, and task B deals with so inside personal issues.
Yeah.
It can be difficult to argue argument, not difficult, but almost stylistically jarring to argue about laughter or freedom. Or no, freedom would be easy, but laughter or aesthetics or clothes, which I got. Oh, no, I didn't get clothes. I got a really bizarre one. What was it? Art? No, I did art before. I can't remember what it was. I got a super real abstract one, real left of field on the day. Anyway, so it can be stylistically weird to argue that, but plenty of people do. Plenty of people get good marks. So I would encourage you not to, you got to do what works. I don't know how quickly you can learn how difficult you find task B. I wouldn't force it if it's not flowing. I do think there's an aspect of this that if you're meant to be a doctor, there's going to be a certain intuition or inner voice that's going to tell you what you need to do, and you've got to back that and trust it. So I would just listen to yourself in a silent moment when you're relaxed and see what comes and just do that. And if you're meant to be a doctor, it'll work out. As far as the first person and the informal, I started a task B. In fact, I got marked by ASA on the online thing, top 1% for an essay that started with "I pooed my pants in year 4." So you definitely don't have to be formal and academic. I am deliberately conversational and informal in a task B. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, thank you. I'll ponder on that a bit more.
Is there something more that I can give you while you've got me that would further clarify?
No, not really, because I was using, I forgot the book. I think it had sentence structures, not sentence structures, but it sort of said that I think it was called GAMSAT formula, section 2. I'm not sure if you've come across that, but if you have sentence structures and you know exactly what to say in each sentence, you're not coming in with a pre-prepared, sorry, I'm stuttering. You're not coming in with prepared essays, but you sort of know how to start your sentence. So that sort of alleviates the pressure during the exam.
Oh yeah, I had that.
Sorry?
I had that.
Yes.
Were pre-prepared. As in terms of, I don't think of it it's not a pre-prepared sentence, it's a pre-prepared function. But I know there are 4 functions of an intro, or 5 functions of an introduction, and each sentence fulfills that function. What you physically write there is irrelevant, as long as you fulfill the function. So I know what each sentence needs to achieve in an essay. So in that sense, the essay is pre-written, or the formula is there.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm just filling things into the formula.
And would it be okay? Do you think it's okay to sort of have literally sentence structures, or sentence starters, so you know what your first sentence of the intro is going to start with?
Not for every sentence, but and the start of the intro I wouldn't. But there were parts of my essays that were the same in every essay. I did have that very canned approach. I made these brilliant, beautiful introductions and all these things, and it got me to a certain point, but it couldn't get me further, so I left it.
Yeah, yeah.
It depends where. It's hard to say without seeing your essays, knowing where you're at. It'll get you to a point, but it depends how well you want to do, because it won't.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it would work up to a 70 or a 72, maybe. I don't think it but not that you can't write a higher essay while doing that. But after that mark, the kind of writing that after that mark requires, that approach starts to become an impediment.
To
that.
Okay.
To work the other way after that.
Okay. Okay.
But you can do it to build up until, so you build, there's so many things that you need to focus on and improve, and it can become overwhelming. So if it takes one thing off your plate to improve while you're doing other things, and just do that, and then master the other things, and then depart and have a departure from that later, that'll be fine as well.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Thanks for answering that.
All good. You're welcome.
Hi, Michael.
Hey.
Just start off by saying thanks for giving time for this. I actually wanted to elaborate on a question that I asked before and you did answer, but one of the things that I like doing is take ideas from philosophers and write a body paragraph that talks about that idea as a whole. I wanted to know if you thought there's a point where that might be a bit overkill, such as if I bring in the ideas of two different philosophers for my two body paragraphs. Do you think that's too much calling upon famous names, or does it have the potential to work well if I do it properly?
I think you should name drop as much as you can, but I wouldn't structure, like my point earlier was that your essay, your body paragraph should not be structured, from my perspective, the body paragraph shouldn't be structured around an existing idea. It should be structured around answering the theme or expounding on a point that linearly progresses an argument that you're making in the essay. That's the point of the paragraph being there. Now, in the fulfilling of that function, I think you should name drop as much as you can. I mean, within reason, yeah, but like you could have 3 or 4 in a paragraph. Like the more you show that of your comprehension of the world and your ability to meaningfully link it to, or link these existing motifs and understood and accepted ideas within psychology or philosophy, if that's your preference, to the theme, that's a great quality to be able to do. That's very high scoring stuff. But the essential, the paragraph itself exists to forward an aspect of your argument that feeds into the proof of the contention. That's like the ontology or the reason for the existence. That's why I call that blog the ontology of task-based structure. Ontology is like the being here, or the experience. I'm just going to become confusing if I go into that point. So let's ignore that point. But you want to ask yourself, why does a body paragraph exist? And I touched on this earlier in the webinar, and you can see it in the, I'm fairly sure it's in the ontology of task-based structure blog.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for us writing an essay is because we have an opinion. So it becomes necessary in the introduction to acknowledge the theme and define a scope of like a part of the theme that you want to talk about, so you know what I'm talking about. I can't just come out with an opinion randomly, right? So, and then I have an opinion, which is the same as the contention, but it's just an opinion. Why would you listen to me? Well, here's a couple of reasons why. Well, I can prove to you this point's true and this other point's true, then that should show that I have, a reasonable or plausible case for my opinion. So that's why you have a body paragraph, is to make a plausible case for the proof of your contention.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, awesome.
So you're very purposeful about the reason why it's there. It's not just there because you're in a GAMSAT and you've got to write a body paragraph 1. It's there actually functionally fulfilling something. So when you say, should I make a body paragraph 1 about a philosopher? It's like, well, without knowing what the theme is, or without knowing what your contention is or your opinion, or how you're going or intend to approach dealing with that contention, you can't really say in advance, oh, I'm going to talk about a philosopher, because you don't know what you're proving. There might not be a philosopher that proves that point as well as something else might.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't use it if it didn't relate to the theme, basically. The more that it does relate to the theme, the more I do.
Yeah, but I wouldn't hold back. Like, if you know stuff, great.
Okay.
But although I would, knowing what a philosopher said is one thing. Evaluating what they said in light of the theme is another thing. That's the next level up. Then contrasting their ideas or integrating them or metabolizing them in a unique and individual way, that is directly reflective of your intelligence, not the philosopher's intelligence. And this is a test of your intelligence, not your knowledge of philosophy. So while it furthers a point and it strengthens an argument, it's better still to interact with it in such a way that you're not just repeating that a philosopher once said something, but that you're either that the way that you brought that up is indicative of that you have appreciated something about a link between that philosopher and that theme that tells the marker about your intelligence, or you explicitly negotiate that existing philosophical idea in such a way as to show that you don't just know a thing, that you can see, or you have insight, or you appreciate some kind of nuance here that gives the marker more of an access into your mind. I got a bit verbose, sorry.
No, that's good. No, that's really helpful. But yeah, that sort of solidified I thought that's what you would answer, I reckon. But yeah, just make sure to bring my own contention into it rather than just repeating what the philosopher said, which is what I try to do anyway, which is good. But yeah, thanks. Awesome.
So when I said I'd stay here till 1, I have a photo shoot tomorrow morning, so I'd rather not. If I have bags under my eyes, Nathan's going to be annoyed. I suppose that's what makeup's for. Some silly
Hey,
person,
Michael.
$700. You didn't apply the discount. Idiot. Sorry. Yes, how can I help?
Oh, I was just going to say thank you for today. I'm going to head off now.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Dismissed. Who has more questions for me? Oh, you're dismissed. You're talking to me. Oh, thank you, Anna. That's so very generous of you. It's not 1 yet. I can still I can stay a bit longer. That's fine. But thank you. Yeah, someone had a question.
Hi, I've just got a question.
Yes, Helen.
I'm just wondering what your thought process is behind creating the premises for your contention.
Yeah, so that's like this is where like I have this thing with phrases where sometimes a question comes and I'm like, I'm glad I've got them there because like some things just occur to me, and that's why like with tutoring, I try and only like do people that are above 70 because I'm like worried that like there's just a point at which like I can only answer it. Some things just occur to me. So I don't know, I just think of it. It's hard to say. The only recommendation I could do is if you understand the basic pattern of argumentation, like if you understand, like for example, the philosophers are mortal and Socrates is a philosopher, or Socrates, if you understand like that thing,
yeah.
I guess I just ask myself, if I were to prove, okay, usually a contention can be broken down into its parts. So like, I don't know, give me a contention. Do you want to give me a contention? All right, I contend that people, the 12 people here are not giving me a contention because of fear of looking bad. That's my contention, okay? So I asked myself, okay, how am I going to prove? Okay, so the parts of that sentence, if you break it down, are that there are 12 people here. That doesn't really require proof. You just have to take my word for it. I can see. Aren't giving me a contention. Okay, so why aren't they doing that? Because they are fearful of looking bad. That's going to be hard to prove because I can't really prove it. But I could say that there is a fear that is extant within, or that I have witnessed at least. Can't say it's extant, that's quite absolute. There is a fear that I have witnessed in humans that arises in social. The social dimension to human relation or relating has intrinsic to it a fearful overhang almost, wherein we somehow unconsciously conflate being rebuked as not just confrontation, but indeed the approach of death itself. That was a bit verbose, but what I'm saying is essentially it occurs to me that, not me particularly, but like when I was younger, like if you were to go up and speak to a girl, for example, and if you got rejected, it doesn't just feel like rejection, it feels like you're going to die. And that's completely irrational, but it's there. And then you wonder, why is that there? And it's like, well, maybe it was in cave times that if you got rebuked by a woman or publicly, like, you know, if you didn't have social acceptance, you might not be able to reproduce, and your your lineage would be cut off. So, you know, natural selection perhaps selected for, you know, people that were the most conservative socially. I don't know. So anyway, my point is that my first premise to why you guys might be doing that must be that there is something that is extant, at least that I've witnessed in human socializing, wherein there is an irrational fear of being rebuked by the crowd. And I might then suppose that this is a function of perhaps, or a consequence of the repercussions of that in cave times. I don't know, right? That would be a start. I haven't yet thought out a full thing, but I know that that's going to probably be an essential piece of a proof of why you might be doing that, is to say that there is, you know, the fear. In order for me to prove that the fear is why you didn't do it, I need to prove that there is fear of being rebuked to begin with, right? So that's my first thing. And then my next bit is, well, if there is indeed a fear, there are many reasons why you might not be stepping up, but I think it's reasonable to suppose that fear, if not the reason, might have a part to play. Now, that's not a very rigorous proof. It's something. I'm not sure if that helps. I'm really sorry. Like, I guess I look at the sentence and I look at each part of it, like of the contention, and I think what needs to be proved for that part of the sentence to be satisfied. And I just go linearly along the sentence.
Okay.
So if it's like democracy is an impediment to humans flourishing spiritually, I don't know, right? You know, so there's democracy is an impediment, okay, to humans flourishing spiritually. So there's kind of these two ideas: humans flourishing spiritually, democracy is an impediment. So I'm gonna have to say something about humans, the circumstances in which humans flourish spiritually, and I'm going to have to say something about how democracy is an impediment to things in general. I suppose I'll start with the spiritual, and I go, you know, humans flourish spiritually under XYZ circumstances, and then these circumstances are incohesive with democracy, and therefore, if democracy contains as a subset of it the circumstances in which spirituality can't flourish, we can therefore say democracy is indeed the impediment to. I don't know if that helped, but you've got to break down the sentences into its parts and think of how you'd prove it. The only other suggestion I can be is what I gave to that other person, which is to Google logical or like basic logic quiz or argumentation quiz or premise thesis or premise proof, I think, quiz, something like that.
Yeah, that was really helpful.
I'm glad. I thought I was a bit off track there.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's like one that's kind of like, I'm trying to like confront the fact that some things just occur to me that it is a bit like a game though. It's like a, and task A is a coup. It's a trap.
Mm.
I set up a set of premise where I set up in, like, I've already thought out, if you're going to agree with me on this and this, you have to agree with my conclusion.
Yeah.
Without you knowing, I go, well, here's a point, right? This might seem random, but here's a point, just bear with me. I'm going to make this point. Do you believe me? You do. Okay, all right, you believe that point. Here's this other point. Do you believe that point? Wow. If you believe that point and that point, you can't not believe that point. So, That's like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, you know.
I guess like it makes sense, but it's just hard to like verbalize.
Like, if you can't do it, and this is the thing, like I generally think, well, so far as I can see in other people, I think like significantly faster than most people. Like I just like my mind goes like and just like shoots all the different lines that a conversation could go and all the implications. And I got a weird mind. But if you can't do it, I would encourage you to, if you can't set up the trap, then I guess maybe what if you asked yourself, why do I think that? So let's say your contention was that democracy is an impediment to, or that democracy has been more successful, or, I don't know, we should redistribute the wealth isn't exactly, that's an opinion really, not a contention. How about the redistribution of wealth and excessive taxation of the rich is a necessary precursor to the flourishing of democratic society. Let's say that's like an opinion that you have. I guess I would ask, okay, why do you have that opinion? This would have worked better if you had to come up with the opinion. Give me an opinion. What have you got an opinion on? Everyone's opinionated. What are you opinionated about?
I guess pollution is bad.
What is?
Pollution.
All right. Well, bad's a moral moral designation or a judgment. So let's say pollution is destructive to
like polar bears. I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking like, to the greatest variation in species or animal species on Earth. Yeah, that's fair enough contention. Okay, cool. So, well, why do you think that pollution is counterproductive to the maximum variety of animal species on Earth?
Why do I think that? I guess based on the prevalence of global warming, that we see a trend of habitats that these species may live on are declining.
Okay, so you think that? So yeah, well, okay. So if it's given that the amount of species are declining, that's a good first part. But can you say that it's pollution? It is a necessary part of the argument. It does need to be satisfied that species are declining if we are to prove that pollution is the reason species are declining. That's what I meant before about saying how you got to look at the pieces of the argument, the piece of the contention, and prove them. So if you're going to prove that pollution is causing species declining, you need to prove that species are declining, right? So you don't bite off more than you can chew. You take off a little bite, you prove that little bite. Then why do you think that pollution is the reason that species are declining? So now the emphasis isn't on the fact that species are declining. Now the emphasis is on that pollution is the reason that species are declining.
Because pollution can impact the habitats of these animals?
Yes, exactly. So if pollution has an impact, a destructive impact on the habitats of animals, and the habitats of animals are a necessary precursor to their surviving, and animals aren't surviving, it is then reasonable to say that pollution is a result of the species declining.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So just ask yourself, why do I think that? And there would be, unless you're an illogical person, there would be a logical underpinning to most of the opinions or ideas that you have. Just interrogate what they are and then argue them.
Yeah, like there's always a logical backing to every opinion that you have.
No, not everyone, but hopefully you. Cool, that was productive.
Yeah.
Got myself out.
That was really helpful. Thank you for clarifying.
How about you, Anna? Apart from dismissing me, you've been uncharacteristically quiet.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Have you got a question?
Yeah, I was wondering about task B. Do you follow the same sort of logic, or are you more just unfolding it in terms of getting your idea and then looking at it from different points of view, or are you trying to prove the logic the same as you would in task A?
Yeah, no, logic is definitely a task A thing for me. Task B's, not that they're illogical, but it's more an exploration. So there's an essential idea that I have. So I get the quotes, and I'll go like, I've got something to say about this thing. Based on, this might not be applicable for everyone, but we've got a small enough group here that I guess there's, some are going to be young, some are going to be old, but I'm old enough, you're old enough to have a breadth of experience and, you know, certain ideas that you have reasonable grounds to have based, if nothing else, than just on your experience, life experience. So, you know, when you read the prompts, hopefully you've got something to say based on, you know, something that happened once, or a relationship that went bad, or, you know, this time that you lost your job and you learned this lesson. You know, if you've been paying attention, there should be, you know, something hopefully that comes up about one of the prompts.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing to prove, because your life experience is, you're an expert on yourself. You don't need to prove that this was my experience. I have to take your word for it. I'm not you, right? You're the authority. So the point then is about what can be distilled or crystallized or extracted from this experience that you've had, or whatever lesson that you've drawn from that experience, that has some first relevance, insight into the theme, but also an applicability more broadly to other people. So you give the instance that happened from which you distilled this lesson that you want to discuss that has some bearing on the theme, that, you know, so you go, oh, you know, I was, you know, it was a Friday, the email came at 10, and I had to pack my things and I was out of the door by 3. And that was the day I lost my job. And at the time it felt like the end of the world. But looking back now, I get to see it was the beginning of a new one. And I don't know, I'm just making shit up, right? My point is that you've got a narrative, and maybe you losing your job taught you something. And what it taught you is that there are green pastures on the other side of what you once tightly clung to. Okay, and this is the idea that you're going to, maybe the quote was, you know, all ends are beginnings. Okay, and you know, you start with this narration, you thrust them into the narrative, figurative, you talk about this thing, and then you distill the reason for the narrative being there is so you can distill this point that you want to talk about. And the point that you want to talk about is that you realize there are green pastures on the other side of what you once tightly. And then you use that narrative as an opportunity, or you can if you wish. You don't have to, but if you want to do it the way I do it, then you use that narrative as an opportunity to reflect now on, you know, you might say, like, at the time it occurred like this, but now looking back from maturity, I can see that in fact, blah, 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 right? And then you might reflect from the antagonist point of view, you know, maybe how your boss is less of a direct link in this one, but, you know, you could reflect on, yeah, again, not a really direct link. Oftentimes though, like I'd write a lot about, I don't know, being bullied, or like an argument with someone, or, you know, a lover or an ex, or whatever it might be. And so then I've got that opportunity, if it's the bully, to empathize with where they're coming from. And if it's the, you know, the lover, to get in touch with where I had not been up to scratch, and then to empathize, which I can't, because inevitably they were a woman.
But in saying it's their perspective that they should get rid of people who aren't contributing to the workplace, and that so you're looking at it from, exploring it from,
yeah, I mean,
the other side,
try and go to the other person, because it shows an ability to get out of your shoes. And
yeah,
you know, most people are very, like, not dignified is not the word, but it's uncommon that people are frank about their weakness or ugliness, and then uncommon for people to be able to empathize with those that have slighted them. So I often start right out the gate with, I once told my pregnant ex-wife, I wish she wasn't pregnant. I'm cringy knowing you're reading that. Yeah. And so I'm right out the gate with, like, that's probably not the, actually was a good idea. The point is that I'm very frank about what I fucked up on. Yeah. And it gives me an opportunity to almost not dig into myself, but really kind of hit home that there is basically the worst. And when I say worst, be careful, because you don't want to show that you've done something that wouldn't be a good quality in a doctor. But the more you can kind of make bad something that actually was not that was trivial, but I trust that you'll take this in the not out of context in such a way that it would be detrimental to the mark. But when I say that the worse the thing that you did is, the more you've got an opportunity to reflect on it from maturity and get the maturity apples.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does build someone, right? But you know, you can make out just, you know, you said something to, or you know, you weren't there for your mum when, I don't know, when she was going through menopause. I've got no idea, right? But but then you can go, look, you know, what I didn't see at the time was this. What I now see is this. Now you've got your maturity apples. Then you switch and you go, you know, and at the time, what occurred to me is you know, her acting a certain way, really I can now see is this. And so you've shown an ability to reflect on yourself in a way that, like, that isn't. Most people just want to always talk about themselves like, you know, they're all amazing and all that.
Yeah.
Not doing that shows a certain altitude and objectivity. And then reflecting on it shows maturity. And then reflecting from the other person's point of view shows empathy and humanity and sensitivity and compassion.
Yes.
So you're just collecting apples, yeah? But once you've done all that, you've got all your task B apples, because they're mostly task B apples: compassion, empathy, sensitivity, objectivity, neutrality, right? Then you switch to the task A apples in the paragraph 2, and then you give them a PEL, like PEL, point, example, evaluate, blah, and you link it more critically and analytically to society. So then you make a logical point. You go, so as I look further afield to, you know, society, I see that this idea that ends at beginnings is exampled perfectly by the Trump administration, or, you know, let's say the advent of COVID. You know, it was the end of a world that, you know, marked or characterized by freedom and ease of affluence. But, you know, in another way, it was the beginning of a life where we got more in touch with our internal worlds, or confronted, you know, trauma or the difficult things that we were avoiding by being out there doing things that we no longer couldn't. You know? And so then, you know, and then you might talk about some philosophy and stuff like that. And so that's more of a typically, essentially, my second paragraph for task B is just a task A.
Okay.
Because I'm just trying to switch gears and go, cool, now you've seen that I've got all these soft, nice qualities. Let's hit you hard.
When you go for the social, the
now, look, I'm like a gun. I'm precise, bang, like, you know, philosophy, psychology, and it's just like real high level, academic, sophisticated. And then I get those, which are like not sensitive qualities necessarily, but they're very they're very like cerebral type qualities. So it's like, hit them in the heart, hit them in the head.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome.
One more question about task A. I wrote the democracy essay that was in the group this week or last week. And something that was bothering me about it, I thought I brought up lots of different ideas, philosophies, all of that, but is it with the topic sentence, I was worried that it was a truth, like it was already true, so that I was proving something that was a given.
Are you talking about my democracy essay or democracy essay?
Mine.
What was your topic sentence?
I wrote.
I read it. Have I marked that one yet?
No, I didn't upload it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Democracies rely on participation of the people to be representative and functional. The democratic process is only as strong as the fabric of the society it represents.
That's a great sentence.
I was just worried that that was what democracy was meant to be. Therefore, I was trying to argue something that was true.
But the first bit that you said was a truism. Well, within a relative framework, if that's, you know, assume, let's just say for the sake it's a truism. But the second bit though was an evaluation. You know, it's not quite an opinion, but it's a perspective that requires. It doesn't require proof, but, you know, if you've got an opinion, it's good to have reasons for your opinions.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to be clear though, that second bit about the fact of democracy is only, you know, as strong as the people or whatever, that bit. Are you concerned about that being a truism?
I just thought that it could maybe not stand up as a logical argument because it's a truism. Yeah.
Well, I would contend that it's not a truism.
Okay.
It's you know, the way that democracy, and let's be clear, when we say democracy, there are no democracies, like ideal democracies on earth currently. There are, you know, but if you're referring to ideal democracy, there are facts of how democracy was conceived structurally, which can be talked about objectively and called truisms, assuming we've interpreted the conception of democracy correctly. But the strength or weakness of democracy is not a truism. There might be a strength or weakness in your opinion, but then someone else's could just as validly go, well, actually, no, the strength of democracy is mutually exclusive from the people, and have a valid line of argument there. So I would contend it's not a truism. It's an opinion that you have. It might be a true opinion, or you can't really say true either.
But I guess you just need something to
extrapolation
that you'll prove with the following evidence.
Yes. Yeah. So had you have just said, democracy exists to enfranchise the people, that wouldn't be a good topic sentence, because that is just structurally, yes, that is what it does. That's just, there's nothing more,
Yeah.
I don't really need proof for that. I'll just take your word, or I'm satisfied with that already. Whereas you want to say something that maybe I won't be satisfied with to necessitate the extrapolation of the rest of the paragraph.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Are there people actually there, or are they like? No. I'm wondering at this point if people just like walked away and like it was just like.
No.
It might be just you and me, Anna. I reckon it's just us. If someone else is there, can you like speak up? No, literally.
Yeah, I'm sort of like listening still.
Oh, we've got Andrea. Okay.
Andrea's here.
All right. So, do you have a question, Andrea?
Look, I've got a lot of questions, and I think at this point I am interested in purchasing your package. I was online and that discount code didn't really work. I think I need to do it on my phone. Is it working?
Yeah, sorry. I hope it's working. A bunch of people are buying, so
it might be my laptop. So
I'll allow you to share screen. Do you want me to allow you to share screen so I can see what's up?
I'm actually on my phone now. I quickly looked at it over my phone and
so did you go shop and did you click the section 2 sorted pack?
Yes, it's got the section 2 and in brackets you've written everything. It's not working on my laptop. I think it works on my phone, so I could just purchase it over my phone. And how does it work? Do you email the package or?
Yeah. So you'll get a download link for all 3 books immediately.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just going to try and buy it myself to check because it's probably not ideal if it's not working for people. March ready. Maybe it's just like the servers. Anyway, I'll say March ready. Apply coupon. Coupon code applied.
Yeah, I think it might be my laptop. So once I leave the Zoom on my phone, I'll just purchase it over my phone.
It's working, or it's at least taking me to the next screen. Order next. I'm up to the proceed to PayPal screen. Proceed. Did you get that far? Yeah, PayPal.
I wish I could share screen. No, it's before the proceed to checkout. So it's got the $6.99, but when I apply the coupon thing, it's not reducing it.
Is it? Are you putting in March MARCH ready? R-E-A?
Yeah, it worked on my phone because I went on the link through my phone. It worked on my phone. I think it's just an issue.
Otherwise, if it doesn't work, you can just PayPal me directly, M John Sunderland, and I can just like email you the books.
Okay. Okay. So once I leave, I'll let you know if it works or not.
My email's on the website anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Look, another issue is I've sat the GAMSAT a few times now, and I feel like I think the second time I did the GAMSAT, I got 72 in section 2. But last year when I did it, my mark reduced remarkably. So it's sort of like I don't even know how I'm
down to
62. So that was a big shock. So from 72 to 62. I don't know whether it was the online format, which I wasn't happy with. Maybe I had some spelling issues or...
Nah, spelling would never be it. Like, they don't really care about spelling and grammar, to be honest. Like, unless it's, like, repeated, like, yours, like, where you're clearly... But if it's just, like, like, little things, honestly, like, that's not at all what they're testing. If you send me... I don't know if you have essays from each sitting, but if you send me an essay that's characteristic of each sitting, one where you got 72, one you got 62, I'll tell you why.
Well, I've got copies from last year, but I think the other one I did, it was back from 2017, and back then it was an online format, so it was in, written format. So
you don't
yeah, I mean,
essays you were writing back then?
I could try and find them. They were probably all really old GAMSAT books. So
I'm happy to have a look, but yeah, without seeing the first lot, it'd be hard to see. But even still, I can have a look at the second lot and say what's wrong with it. Like, not like wrong, but like what could be improved.
Yeah.
So yeah, just email me. If you've got me on Facebook or if you're in the group, you can just DM me. Otherwise, email me at 90plusgamsat at gmail.com, and I'll have a look over it and let you know.
Thanks, Michael.
No worries. You're welcome.
I'm here to contribute to the group. I'm sort of like, I need to provide a bit more feedback, and then I'll start. Yeah.
It seems to stress everyone out, but I think everyone, I don't know, maybe you can chip in, Anna, but people seem to be happy once they start doing it because they start getting the results.
Yeah, I was really scared to share mine initially, but
I was as well.
Once I did one and then got some feedback, I haven't been scared since.
Your last essay was fucking brilliant.
Oh, really?
No, well, I told you that at the time. And Zoe as well. I was listening to Zoe's testimonial video when she was talking about how scared she was to post an essay. I was like gobsmacked. I was like, are you fucking serious, love? You're writing it like a
I was terrified. Yeah, it's scary.
Great. But like you and her particularly. Kieran's good as well. And Lara hasn't posted many, but she's good. But like it's you and Zoe particularly, which I've seen the uplift in.
Yeah, mine have massively changed since I've been sharing them in that group, like in a few weeks.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. That's why you got to, you better face the fear now than in the GAMSAT. You'd rather be scared now in front of, where there's nothing on the line rather than, when there's $500 and, another 6 months of your life on the line in a day. So anyway, I recommend, Andrea, that you do it.
Okay. Yeah, I think the fear is just coming from the, the massive drop in marks. So I think, I need to get over that fear. And
I think the best thing, Andrea, is that you're probably downplaying your strengths. Like someone will comment on your essay if you upload one and be like, wow, you've got an amazing way of describing things that happen to you. And you'll be like, oh, great, I'm going to use that then. That's my strength. And then I'll work on some other aspect. But like at the start of this webinar, how they were saying, use what you're good at. I would now use things that I never thought that I would use. But because people have said, wow, you've got a beautiful way of describing whatever events, then I'll be like, okay, well, I'm gonna use that.
Yeah.
It's you can't, like, you literally can't. I mean, not you cannot, but I got so much feedback, like on my essays, like just constantly. And even when people like would mark silly marks, I'd ignore the mark, but I can hear how they receive my work and distill something from it. People have so much value to give you. The only way I know to do extraordinarily well in section 2 is I've got it here. I'm going to pull up the screenshot of one of my books because there's the diagram there and it's just going to be easier to show you than explain it. Share screen. Philosophy. Where is it? Here. So it's like, this is my 40th essay. I start here and I'm off. And so this X line, this X axis is a perfect essay, right? I might be doing something and then someone corrects me and I overshoot it. But it's this constant process of adjustment. Yeah. You have no idea what you're doing in this area, what you're doing. Yeah. It's not, it doesn't make you a bad person or like a shit writer to do something like that's not like, as I said, it's not a test of your writing. It's a test of GAMSAT writing. You can't possibly have a context of a good GAMSAT writing without doing it and getting adjusted, right? Unless you are expecting or unless you are judging your success as your ability to perfectly intuit what GAMSAT want based on no criteria, like just spontaneously, which would be an unrealistic way to assess your intelligence. So it's just... GAMSAT literally, this is why I started doing all this, is it's like they've literally just put a dartboard up and the bullseye, like you just got to throw darts and you got to just guess where the bullseye is. Like nobody knew until I feel like I like put all this effort into to clarify what GAMSAT writing is and what good GAMSAT writing is. And
before then though, it felt to me a lot like guesswork. People were having to do guesswork, and I had to use a lot of intuition, and I just thought that was bullshit. So my point is, anyway, that there's this mysterious criteria, which I'm like demystifying by telling you, but you've got to practice it. So you just narrow in progressively. But the only way to narrow in on this line, or to reliably be able to produce writing that approximates the line, is by trialing. You know, trialing, and then get your feedback and adjust and adjust and adjust and adjust. You know, and you get closer every time. But it's the adjustments are absolutely necessary, and the adjustments can't be made unless you get feedback, because people will say things you'll never have thought of. You know, this situatedness idea, which you'll read about it if you get the stuff, but it's a very powerful point. And it's like, that came out of my friend Liv. It's that same essay about my ex-wife. I told her she was, that essay that started, I told my ex-wife once, I wish she wasn't pregnant. I wrote something like, I was trying to be really mature, and I was like, you know, and I imagine as a wife, you know, she felt a lack of security in her husband, or something like that. I can't remember what I said exactly, right? But Liv, my friend, read it, and she was like, there's just something that just gets me about, I don't like that you said, you like assuming that you know how she feels. And I just totally didn't get it, like what she was saying. I thought I was being like real mature by like getting in her shoes and like empathizing, but I didn't yet realize that I can't actually empathize because I'm not a woman and I don't know what it's like to be pregnant. I can say I'm a feminist, but I don't know what it's like to be fearful at night.
Yeah.
So there are actual physical limits on my empathy. I can only imagine and sympathize. And then when I realized that, I was like, oh, then I started talking about that in my task Bs, talking about how I can only do my best. And then I realized that was like a really high scoring quality to be able to convey. But that,
do you say that in every task B about how you have limited ability to empathize?
Yeah, but like people copy me in a way that's kind of doesn't. Like, I don't mind they copy me. That's not what bothers me. It's that they
understand.
They say it, but they don't get it. And because they don't get it, they'll do things earlier in the writing that show that they don't actually get it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to encourage people at the moment. I put a post in the group about it. I'm trying to encourage people to actually understand and like, but this guy I'm tutoring, Tim, did it really well last week. I pulled him up on it the week before and he came back and he showed that he actually understood it. And then anyway, but yeah, I do. Situatedness is one of the psychometric things that I think, I don't think I wouldn't do it in a task A. Somewhat. It's just, that's a very nuanced point, that one. But people tend to talk as if they objectively know things or that the conclusions that they're making about the world around them come from a read of the world that is objective, which is incorrect if you acknowledge that the read that you have of the world is disfigured by your gender, socioeconomics, beliefs, worldviews, experiences. When you see that what you have seen of the world isn't the world as it actually is, you have to then recognize that the conclusions that you make about the world are, or therefore cannot be fully relied on. So you then start to have a bit of a sensitivity to the limits of the veracity or the truth of what you're saying. Conveying an awareness of the limits of what you're saying, but objectively the way the world actually is quite a high order thing to be able to do. You don't have to do it, but it can be a very high scoring way of doing it. So yeah, I do implement a conveying of my understanding of that in most of my essays. Did I totally confuse you? I'm sorry if I did.
No, I got your point. I'm just thinking it's sort of, it becomes a bit difficult to articulate.
I can't hear you if you're speaking. Hold up. Microphone. Okay, sorry, I cut my speakers off. If you said something, I missed it.
Sorry, I was just saying, I know I completely understood what you were saying. It's just Just trying to think about how to articulate it in the actual essay.
I do explicitly say it. I'm just saying that what I see in students is that they literally take the line and use it in a way that doesn't kind of flow with the rest. I do explicitly say. I say at the end of my task B, you'll see, if you get the book, you'll see in the essays, look for it. At the end of my body paragraph 1, I say something like, let's say it was the example of the wife. I would say something like, now being a firstly male and very non-pregnant male, there are necessarily limits to my ability to empathize with truly how my wife may have been feeling as a result of that comment. I can imagine that perhaps she felt a lack of security, safety even, perhaps that she was hurt, or perhaps made that mean that her relationship was insecure or unstable. But I can't know. The lack of my ability to truly empathize with someone that is pregnant and a woman, being that I'm a man and not pregnant, is, however, something that necessitates my sympathy with her. If we are to, or if I am to remain sensitive to what is important to her, and to continue to relate to her in ways that are socially or relationally productive. So see, I didn't just say, I mean, you can just say, because I am X, I have necessarily, there's a limit to my empathy, and that necessitates my sympathy. If you want to say that, just say it, right? But the way I just did it there was incorporated to the specifics of the scenario such that I conveyed a genuine understanding of that there's something in the way of me, really. So the best I can do is imagine, but that I can't get across there necessitates me trying to sympathize, because trying to sympathize has this function that brings me, that connects me with her. But I don't impose my male understanding of the world on her and say, this is how she feels. I know. That would be wrong, because I don't know. I can only suppose. And even if she told me, what she said comes from a place that I just can't understand. So how she even understands the words that she says to me, we're getting like real deep with this now. Her understand words that she uses to impart to me her feelings or sentiments on the topic come from, fear to her means something different than to me. To me, maybe fear is of not being good enough, or of not doing my best, or of not feeling adequate. And there's this unconscious conflation of fear with that to me. To her, it might mean, I don't know, maybe physical fear of harm, or of her boundaries being contravened by a man in a pub. So the way she relates to fear, the way I relate to fear are going to be different. And so to say that we really both understand exactly, or that my understanding of fear is exactly how she is, when she says I fear something, I mean, I get it enough for things to be functional, but there is something that's slightly different, And I really don't think you need to go into to that level of depth for GAMSAT, by the way. I'm just talking because you asked it.
No, I got it. Thanks for going into that.
Welcome. I'm starving. I'm going to be straight up. I don't know if Sarah and whoever that lovely face is, Sana and Namin, are there. But I want to eat.
Just listening to everyone and your hints and everything. That's so helpful. Thank you for tonight.
You're very welcome. Thank you for staying so long. I can't believe you've been here for 3 hours.
Yes.
Wait, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 4 hours. We're here for 4 hours.
Yeah, I'm in Brisbane, so I started.
Fuck, man. Arshad tapped out at 9. I'm going to give him so much shit for that tomorrow. put in a real innings, mate. I did double. Anyway, I'm going to call it if that's right, unless anyone has a pressing question, because I like, oh, Nameen's here. He can't turn his audio on. Hi, Nameen. Do you have, I'll give you, do you have one more question before I go and feed myself? Go eat and sleep. Thank you. I appreciate you all.
Thank you, Michael.
You're very welcome. Email me if you need something. I hope the code works for you. Yeah, anyway, I'm sure you figure it out.
Yeah, I think it should work on my phone, so I'll purchase it over my phone. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.